All right, we're back a little earlier this time. It was only a couple weeks ago we did the September show. So we are observe this, the October 1989 time frame, obviously utilizing the Wrestling Observer newsletter. Brandon Draven is here with me, and we're going to go through. You know, it's kind of crazy. After we do this show, we only have 2 left, and the entire year of 89 is over.
Yeah, that is crazy. We did it a whole year.
It's
12 episodes in the can.
Now, you know, you work on tons of projects, but kind of like when you think of a project and it's, you know, a year-long one, it feels kind of like we're going to plan for it. If we get there, we get there. We'll see the bumps. And it's kind of, you know, we've had some scheduling stuff because of real life events and sports and stuff, but otherwise we haven't had any problems, like maybe early on, you know, when you had to use your phone a couple times, but we got through that. So yeah, it's been pretty, I guess, cross my fingers. It hasn't been any real issues. So good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you've also been very understanding on some of the issues on my end, and it's just communication, bro. Communication. When it's teamwork, you have to have communication, and things tend to work out. You know?
Absolutely. I love it. I love it when it works out too, because it makes it feel like, when you get to the end, it makes it feel like you've actually, you know, done some stuff, and we've turned these into live streams that, you know, a lot of people aren't watching live because we record so late on the East Coast, but I do check the replay views, and these shows do very well because they have they withstand the test of time. They're very evergreen, so that's what I also like.
Yeah.
And then just, you know, we've talked about where we go in January, and I think we're going to attempt at least to cover 1984, which will be a little different because there's not the tentpole shows that kind of every month, so we'll have to figure out a cadence there, but that'll be fun too.
Right. No, yeah, and also the cool thing is that I think the network has some television from 84, and also we have Starrcade. At least we're going to cover Starrcade,
right?
So that's something at the end of the year. But yeah, no, first of all, I want to thank everybody that has watched us or listened to us on podcast form. I want to thank you because, I mean, it's always nice to, you know, have listeners and get some of that validation that way. So it's cool. Yeah. And at the end of the day, I get to come on here and just talk about wrestling, which is something that I love.
Yeah.
And sometimes baseball. We want to apologize for the baseball talk too.
We're always going to talk baseball. That's just our thing. And unfortunately, this is not 2014. It is 2024. So your team is leading here. We will talk about baseball at the end because I saw a question.
I thought you were going to say, unfortunately, this is not 2010 or 2012 or 2014. But I hear you.
We do have a baseball question that we'll get to at the end from your Facebook page. But here's where I want to start with this show. So it is October of 1989. If you are from the Bay Area, October of 1989 stands out because of the Loma Prieta earthquake. And I wanted to start there because, you know, when I think of the earthquake, I remember exactly where I was. I remember who I was talking to. We're getting ready to watch Game 3 of the World Series on the phone with my buddy who's an A's fan. And the thing, you know, we've dealt with earthquakes. You would actually have your own version of that, like 5 years later, I guess, right? What was that big earthquake in SoCal?
The Northridge earthquake in 94.
94, yeah. So 5 years later. And so I remember everything about where I was, but I've never thought about it in relation to pro wrestling. And because we have the Wrestling Observer newsletter, we have Dave's thoughts on how he is getting his job done through the earthquake. And he opens up the October 30th issue about the earthquake, saying that he was actually supposed to be at the beach that day. The beach.
Typical Dave.
Still his favorite place.
Yeah.
But was waiting for a business call. You know, I should have asked him if he remember who this
probably
call
from
was
Japan.
Well, no, that would have been a fax.
That would have been a fax. To this day, he's got the fax machine or Japan.
He does. He still gets notes on it too. That thing still comes through. Okay,
because even though Japan is 10 years ahead of us in every way, shape, or form, they're still using fax to deliver messages. Yeah,
paper trail, man. They use paper trail. So he's waiting for a phone call, and because he doesn't get that phone call, he decides to get caught up on tapes. That's what he does in his in his time where he, he's waiting on people. He catches up on stuff he's supposed to watch. So because of this thing that happened, where he did not go out, he didn't get stuck on one of the freeways that would have been troublesome for him during that time frame when the earthquake hits. So that's one thing. But in true Dave fashion, he says, the worst thing that actually happened to me was that my cabinet full of videotapes just fell out and made a mess on the floor, and I had to pick those up. But here's what I didn't realize. Two things, actually, wrestling related, that I didn't realize. So WWF had a show that week at the Cow Palace.
Mm-hmm.
The Cow Palace, I'm assuming, was damaged in some way, but the whole infrastructure, the whole Bay Area was damaged in some way. Even if you, like, for instance, my house, like, one thing fell in my house and that was it. But power was out, no electricity. The aftershocks were consistent. They were happening, every few hours, where you kind of wake up and go, oh no, is this it again? But it would be a small aftershock. So that was kind of, everybody had to deal with that. Some people had to deal with freeways, and there were like a handful of people who did pass away. But so Titan is supposed to have a show at the Cow Palace. That gets postponed a couple of weeks, I think. And what's interesting is they tried to run a version pretty much of the same card, even though they had to do some makeup dates. But also what happens, and this is going to be related to something that we'll talk about later, Halloween Havoc was originally scheduled to be like a couple weeks after the World Series was going to be over. But
Right.
because of the earthquake, it pushes Game 4 head-to-head with Halloween Havoc. Thankfully for the show, that World Series was done. My poor team was a lost cause at that point. And Halloween Havoc actually does a pretty good buy rate, all things considered. And all the reasons that we'll kind of talk about were reason to believe that it wasn't going to do a buy rate. There's no world title match on that card. The draw is like the gimmick of this match coming off of the Ric Flair and Terry Funk with the plastic bag. But what I wanted to ask you, and we'll let this set the table because we'll get back to Halloween Havoc. The Clash of the Champions that we're going to talk about next time is the New York Knockout or whatever.
In Troy, New York. Yes.
In Troy, New York. And Dave just blasts that building in the observers leading up to this show. He's like, yeah, it's kind of cold in there. Yeah. It's not a professional building. So I kind of wondered about this. Now, we think of the way that we look at big matches and drawing today is a little different than how we grew up, because now the draw is like the TV rating and these PLEs, which you get to see on Peacock. Mm-hmm. Netflix changes the game even more. But in 1989, the draw was your house shows and then the money that you made on pay-per-view. The Ric Flair and Terry Funk I Quit match, which is one of the greatest matches of all time, why didn't that happen on Halloween Havoc, do you think?
That's a good question. That's a great question, actually. I think they just felt the bigger draw was the gimmick with the Thunderdome or the Thunder Cage or whatever, and that's pretty much what it comes down to. I think they just, when they needed something for November, that the I Quit match was in November. Yeah, it was in November.
Yeah, it was in November.
That was it. It was about time to blow off that feud. So it just so happened to be slotted in that time, So that's pretty much it.
Here's what I was also thinking. And this, you would have to sort of understand wrestling pay-per-view for WCW going back to 1987. They ran the Ric Flair and Lex Luger match on pay-per-view a couple times, and then they would have to run it again in 1990. I wonder if they thought there would be fatigue from doing the same match back to back. Though the thing that I think would have been great is the I Quit stipulation. Like, that would have been a fantastic sell to get just a little bit more out of Terry Funk and Ric Flair.
Yeah, well, I think first of all, and we'll get to it because they have another videotape fuck up with the TV later on. We're trying to give them too much. I think me and you are overthinking this already because we're trying to give them too much credit. But with that said, let's go ahead and me and you put our Booker hats on. I would have to see how the Great American Bash did,
right,
to see if it would have been financially, reasonable to run the I Quit match as Halloween Havoc. Because if it didn't do well, then again, like you said, maybe they thought there was already some fatigue there and they just saved it to pop a number, which it did pop. It popped a huge number. I think another thing too is that we're looking at it in hindsight, and maybe they were not expecting it to be as successful. Especially because look at the arena they ran it in, the city, and so maybe they were thinking this is the blow off, this is a throwaway match. We're about to move into another direction. Terry Funk's gonna have a babyface turn here, and it is what it is. So I think it's a combination of the Thunderdome, them wanting to promote that as the big gimmick, and also just not having faith in Terry Funk and Ric Flair, and just not really thinking about it. As far as it's in a throwaway city, kind of like just to pop a number, and then lo and behold, it was hugely successful on television.
Yeah.
So so I think that's what happened.
And I think the thing that made me think about that is as we were watching back and we're watching the Clash and we're reading up on kind of the follow up to the Clash, and we're going to talk about this in a second. Also, the violence in wrestling and all of this, which is a big topic for Dave.
Dave goes on a rant here, which we're going to get to later on.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you think about how TV works today, that plastic bag match, or that match where Terry Funk puts a plastic bag on Ric Flair's head, that leads to the blow off. That's kind of how we see wrestling, or how we learned wrestling. It doesn't lead to the tag match and then the blow off. So it's just a little bit different the way that they did it, and the way that I sort of learned how those things usually work. But like we said, in hindsight, plus it worked for them fine. It was completely fine for the way that they did business.
Right. Also, we also got to remember that even now television's changing, right? And the pay-per-views, or PLEs or whatever, because now you're also starting to see Triple H use a lot of gimmick matches on TV. Like we had the Monsters whatever match with all those big guys, and it was a critically acclaimed match. It was a good match, but that used to be on pay-per-view back in the day. Like 2-3 years ago, that would have been a pay-per-view match. And then now you're seeing like throwaway stuff on pay-per-view, right? Like Gunther and Cody Rhodes. Like that was a nothing match. It was a good match, but it had no repercussions for the future.
Absolutely.
So we're starting to see this big switch, because television pays so much, you want to attract more viewers. So now you're giving more importance to it. There's a lot of stuff that happens on television, including good matches.
Yeah.
Whereas now the PLEs are like, okay, here's your house show for the month. It reminds me, some of these PLEs remind me of those old Spectrum shows, or the Sunshine Network shows, or the MSG channel shows, where they were literally just televised a house show.
Yeah.
But I get it. It's business.
Yeah. And what I said earlier as well, house shows are very important. So you run that angle with Ric Flair that everyone can see who has TBS, to set up the next house show run, which is how they did business. So it was just an interesting thought experiment that, as I was reading back on some of that stuff. All right, let's maneuver over to WWF, because the big story is who's going to leave WWF to go to the other side. NWA has to bring over some stars, and who's going to leave. And we've heard this before, and we'll hear it again. But the first person that everyone goes to is Bret Hart, because they know how good he is, yet they know how bad of a fit he is for WWF, the way that they're doing television at this point. So that's like the big rumor. And here's something I did not know. Vince McMahon, this is a quote from The Observer, Vince McMahon had personal meetings this past week with both Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage to make sure the key stars aren't considering making a move. And I wonder what, like, if you're Nature Boy, I'm assuming Nature Boy would be kind of the go-between to make that move. Like, what do you offer those? Like, what even gets Hogan to think twice about a move to the NWA? Like, what money figure could they even
Well,
have
what you don't
offered?
do is show them where the next Clash of the Champions is going to take place from. That's something you don't do, first of all. No, I mean, I think there's nothing. There's nothing, and to your point, it comes down to what Bischoff had to eventually do, right? Which is pretty much give him control of the company.
Yeah.
That's really what it took to get
But
Hogan.
Hogan also had to fall out of favor of Vince McMahon. Like, there's a whole domino effect of so many different things that happened to Hogan so that he was available to Eric.
Yeah.
But here Hogan is like, he may not be the peak Hogan, but he's pretty damn close.
Yeah, he's still there. He's still there. I would say the peak ended in around like 90, 91. But but at this point, no, he's still very much the top guy in the business. And I'm gonna answer your question. There's nothing.
Yeah.
Literally, other than offering him, complete control of the company, there's nothing you could offer him.
What if Flair's like, hey, Randy, you're kind of in Hogan's shadow over there. Come over and be our top guy.
Yeah, that would
gonna
I
be
could
you,
see that.
me, Sting, and Lex, and we're gonna just run this thing.
Yeah. You're gonna see.
Yeah.
What would he say? Thinking. No, yeah, with him, you could manipulate him a little more to jump ship, but it would take a lot of money, and yeah, he would have to be the top guy.
Yeah.
But again, Garrett, that's what ended up happening anyway.
And
so except these guys were about 10 years older when it did happen,
and
7 or 8
they
or whatever.
probably got 3 or 4 times as much money as they would have in 1989.
Yeah. So I think wrestling tends to be a very paranoid business as it is, especially in this time. So I think Vince, even though me and you are thinking logically, I don't think Vince was thinking logically. Vince was thinking out of paranoia and fear.
Yeah.
So he had to have that meeting. My question is, like, what about like the Jake the Snakes and the Roddy Pipers? Because he only invited 2 people to that meeting.
Ted. Ted would have.
What about all the other guys? And they're like, well, we don't matter. We could jump too, And
yeah. But from Vince's perspective, he probably feels like as long as he has those 2 guys, he's fine.
Yeah, that's true. That is very true. And
because if he talks to those other guys, he shows them that they are important to him, and that raises their leverage up, and maybe they do sneak over to Crockett or Turner and go,
right,
hey, and then they try and leverage back and bargain, and and Vince probably is like, I don't even care about those. I only care about these 2 guys.
Yeah, no, one of the things during this era of Vince, right, is that he's very smart, and he's thinking 2-3 moves ahead all the time. So yeah, no, he needed to have that meeting for sure. I was trying to think, just using my own knowledge, I wasn't cheating or looking stuff up. I was trying to think who were the guys that ended up leaving. I mean, the Rujos left, and so did the Brainbusters. But Ron Bass also left in January of '89, right after he had the angle with Beefcake, where Beefcake cut his hair. But I think that's the only guy. I don't think anybody else jumped ship during this time, because Owen Hart had already left.
Yeah.
And Sam Houston, that's how much of a nerd I am. I'm thinking of those bottom of the barrel guys. Sam Houston had already left as well. So yeah, I couldn't think. You know what was a good card to help me make sense of all this was the 1990 Royal Rumble, because anybody that would have left wouldn't have been on that show, because they used everybody, and everybody was accounted for. Everybody that was anyone during this time of the year was at that show, except for no, actually Ron Bass left in early '89, so I was confused. Yeah, so I can't think of anyone else.
Yeah. So we mentioned this last time that the Brainbusters are leaving. They are the tag team champions, so Demolition get the titles back. And this was an interesting one. So prior to 1993, the King of the Ring was like a yearly thing, but it was a house show gimmick, and I think they did it on the East Coast or something.
Yeah, Rhode Island and Boston, Rhode Island area.
So Tito Santana wins the King of the Ring, and Dave believes that it was Barry Windham's tournament to lose, and he no-shows. And throughout this time, I don't know why Dave thinks that Windham is no-showing. He will eventually say that Wyndham has some injury or he has some.
Well, I know the story. I mean, we could say because he leaves in November, so it's part of this month. What ends up happening is that Kendall and his dad end up they have this scheme where they're counterfeiting money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Counterfeiting money, and so somehow Barry gets involved with that, and so there's a lot of legal issues there. I think Kendall and Blackjack both end up in jail for that. So Barry Windham has to take care of a lot of the family thing, and he has to leave, and so that's why he leaves. So I feel like this is a situation where Dave is protecting Barry because sometimes Dave has information that's very personal and he doesn't want to say it till he could say it. Because he's very vague. It goes from injury to personal reasons.
Right.
It kind of changes throughout the, unfortunately, I mean, it reminds me of, how ironic of like Bray Wyatt later on, right? When Bray Wyatt was going through his issues, you could hear Dave's concern, but he would never say outright what was happening. He just kept on saying he's off WrestleMania, but he sounded worried. Same thing here, just in print form. Like it went from like having an injury to personal reasons, and then later on it would come out that his family was in legal trouble and he had to leave. So that's what happened.
And you wonder, do we ever know what Vince's plan was for him?
No, and you know what? If you recall, when he was first signed, which was the summer of '89, Vince actually went out and said he wasn't going to get pushed. Mm-hmm. He was just gonna I guess he wanted to test them a little bit because Barry ended up leaving with a lot of heat, right? Because he just left when he was in the U.S. Express, and there was a lot of heat over that. So him coming back, 3-4 years later, I mean, Vince holds grudges. Yeah. So his whole thing was just. And he hadn't even been put in a program yet. He never worked the program. He was just doing house shows with random guys. Looking at 1990, I guess he fits in the Intercontinental title picture. Maybe he gets a perfect spot. The Kurt Hennig spot with the Intercontinental title run. Because there was no, or maybe they set him up for Warrior in the spring of '90. So there's a lot of possibilities.
Because when he's brought in, Dave thinks he's brought in directly to get a run with Hogan. Like he just assumes that's the plan. Why would you bring in Barry Windham? Well, you bring him in to show Hogan beating an NWA guy. But then they change his name and they do all that thing. So it's kind of interesting.
Right. But then later on, if he would have quote unquote passed the test, they could have just gone back to Barry Windham. Like they did with Steve Austin and Kerry Von Erich. So that was Vince's MO. He'll bring you in with a gimmick, test you out a little bit, and then if you were good enough and he saw money in you, then all of a sudden you get to use your real name again.
Have you ever been to one of those old Superstars or Wrestling Challenge TV tapings?
No.
So like long show, like 4 hours long, and you're just sitting through like the same matches and these promos and. So I went to one. It was at the San Jose State Event Center, which is the same building that they held that one historic NXT show where Vince McMahon finally understood women's wrestling after all these years. So we're at this taping. This would have had to have been, I'm going to guess, 95-ish time frame. And actually, the house show main event, the dark main event, remember during this time, I want to say it was like Bret Hart and Diesel in the cage, and then Undertaker would come up from the ring and pull down whatever time frame that was. That was when
that was February of '96.
Okay, so we're at this TV taping, and the way that the event center is like there's like floor, and then like everything is just elevated and it just goes all the way up. There's like not two different like an upper deck and then another. It's just like it just goes all the way up. So I see a wrestler and I go, wait, they brought back Barry Windham again. And so I run down the thing to kind of get a better look, and it was the very first gimmick match or Superstars match for Justin Hawk Bradshaw. And I was like, oh man, I thought that was Barry Windham. But then Barry Windham comes anyways to do the blackjack.
Yeah, the stalker.
Thing. Yeah.
No, the stalker.
And then they do the blackjacks thing in what, 98?
Yes.
97, 98. So yeah, so like that's 7 years later, and I'm still thinking about, man, the Barry Windham run.
No, that was it. Barry Windham after '89, he was not the Barry Windham anymore. You know, he would come back in late '90, I want to say, back to WCW, and then he started feuding with the Yellow Dog for some reason, which is Brian Pillman. And that was it.
I actually like that match, the Tate Fist match.
Yeah, once he had the literal bowl haircut, that era of Barry Windham, done.
I'm only mentioning this because just this name just brings back memories for me. But in this time frame, referee Joey Marella was in a serious car accident and he ruptured his spleen. Was this the one where he fell asleep driving?
No, that would have been '94.
That's
94.
the one where he passed away.
Yes, in very, very gruesome fashion that I'm not going to get into here. But Harvey Whippleman was with him. That's how we know how he passed away.
Right.
And the details.
Right.
Yeah, that was Gino's son.
Who gets in two nasty car accidents like that, though? That's
somebody that I think, I'm assuming here, but I think somebody that has bad habits on the road, you know?
I'm sure. So, Joey Marella, definitely like one of the two WWF referees from my childhood. Dave Hebner, pre-Earl Hebner, was one. Joey Marella would be the other one. And
Danny Davis, not Danny Davis?
Well, that would be a little bit later, but then he became the heel character who was a great heel.
But then they just dropped the angle and he was a referee again. They just dropped the angle and he was a referee again.
Well, these guys were better than Ronnie Garvin's referee stint from last month.
Oh, it was horrible and everything during that year.
But one of the Pro Wrestling Insider kind of things where, you kind of learn stuff about people, and Jesse would make these comments about Joey Marella without saying that was Gorilla's son. And so it's like you have one of those aha moments. You're like, oh, that's Gorilla's son. You kind of make that connection when, you read magazines or whatever. But I was always so sad for Gorilla. Like, his life is wrestling. He's has a great job in as we learn, going back to the earlier days with Vince Sr. and that relationship. And then he lives through his son dying, and then he kind of dies while
he was never the same after that. Was '94, and he would pass away in '99. So he would only live 5 years after. And then he was also Victor Quiñones he was also his dad. I learned that from the Observer, but I had no idea, from Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And he also passed away, but I think he passed away after Gorilla, if I remember correctly. He also passed away young, though. So yeah, definitely a very accursed family there. A lot of people dying young. Because even Gorilla was only I was surprised to hear this. He was only 60 when he died. He had diabetes. And then at the end, in '99, we last saw him at that WrestleMania, that Vince Russo WrestleMania. He was one of the judges for the Butterbean fight with Bart Gunn.
Wow.
And he was you couldn't even recognize him anymore. And then he passed away a couple months after that. But yeah, very tragic for sure.
There's a book coming out on Gorilla Monsoon. I think it's who's the guy that wrote the book on the Sheik? Is it Brian Solomon or Brian something?
Yeah, Brian. Yeah,
I think he's the one who's writing the book on Gorilla, and I'm excited to read about Gorilla because, I don't know too much about his life necessarily before wrestling, but so I'm looking forward to that one.
Well, he was a character, right? He was one of the things that me and Big D on their old show used to always mark out at and pop at is that he used to say, Vince had him in a box, and before the show he would take him out of the box, and then after the show he would put him in the box, because the Gorilla Monsoon broadcast character, nothing existed outside of the WWF. Hulk Hogan was the best professional athlete in the world, according to him. The World Wrestling Federation, you had a very defined line of good guys and bad guys. I know another thing that Ventura would always clown on was his gambling habit, because Gino was known as this big time gambler. And in those WrestleManias, he would say, "I saw you out there till 3 a.m, wasting all your money." And then Gino would always be like, "Was I? Oh, that's just the way it is." So little digs like that, Yeah,
no. If you have knowledge and you go back and you just hear all of these little inside things that you're like, oh man, if I would have known, I would have known exactly what they were talking about, but we didn't have that knowledge. Now, in some instances, they're telling on themselves with this stuff. Like there's the news of the ring boy thing came back again. They're telling on themselves back then with some of those comments. Like they knew stuff that was going on that they probably should not have been joking about.
Yeah. But with that whole good old boys high school mentality that they all had, they didn't think it was gonna come back to bite them, you know?
Yeah. Coco Beware fired after a hotel room brawl with executive Jim Troy, who was a former hockey enforcer. But Dave, Dave has to tell us who won the fight. He says Coco actually came out the better in that fight, but
Yeah.
he gets fired for it. He's fired for having a fight. I wonder what that fight was about.
Who knows? But with Coco, they were always testing him, you know? And I think there was some racial stuff with him constantly because he was a small guy.
Yeah.
But he could scrap. He could scrap. That guy. He has a couple of W's under his belt when it comes to backstage scuffles. I know he beat up Steve Kern one time. The fight that you just talked about. But they didn't fire him for long because he's all over the cards going forward. You know, so they brought him back.
So Dave also writes, and this is like him telling the future. Trouble always seems to happen when WWF goes to Europe. Remember the plane ride from hell stuff?
Oh man, even back then, huh?
Yeah. So he also said the Rockers were fired as well, but rehired the next day.
That seems to be a pattern with Vince, you know. So just to keep track, this is Marty Jannetty's second firing from the company.
I think so.
Yeah, because they brought him in '88, and that was when we got the infamous "those boots are made for walking," line from Vince. And then they brought him back, and then now they got fired again, and then they brought him back. So we're at Jannetty firing number 2. I think this is 2 out of like 9 for the next 10 years. Yeah, for sure.
So WWF goes to Europe. I thought this was really weird. Now, I'm just going to read it straight from the Observer and get your thoughts on this. WWF found itself having to use the English wrestlers on the undercard. There was some obscure law in England that matches can't be held between 2 non-citizens of the British Commonwealth, although I guess they had to pull strings since Hogan versus Savage doesn't exactly qualify under those rules. They did use local guys in prelims to satisfy local authorities.
Yeah, well, let's keep in mind that this is Saw in its infancy, right? I mean, I thought I thought this was their first official European tour because I don't remember them being there in '88 or '87, and they're certainly not going to be there before that. But they might have been there in '88. If Dave's not talking about this is their first time in Europe, so they were already there previously. But this is one of the first big tours of Europe because I remember the big deal that it was when they first went to Europe, and it was around this time. So that's probably why they had all these weird laws.
So ticket prices in London range from $18 to $45. Pretty good prices for Hogan and Savage in the main event. And I sent you a link. I didn't watch it myself, but there's a Reddit thread where they have footage of the match Hogan and Savage in London. I think it was broadcast like on the Sky Network or whatever, like live, like so people may have that out there.
It's in one of the Super Tape videos. I think Super Tape 1 or 2. Yeah, they have the entire European tour on their different matches.
I wonder if they have any matches with the local English guys that they had to use so that they didn't make the local authorities mad.
No, I think Vince holds grudges, and that he would never allow those guys to be on TV. But yeah, and I wonder who they were. Like, was it Johnny Saint or any of these guys?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Also, is like if someone went to those shows, maybe someone listening
was the future Observer Hall of Famer Big Daddy. He was still alive during this time, right? Yeah, he was still alive. So yeah, we'll see.
Future.
And I said we'll see out of just in stream of consciousness because we're gonna get that issue coming up in a couple of days.
I've tried to get you on the a credential here for a ballot. I think you just need to like email Dave and we need to send. You need to say, hey, I do a show called Observe This where I study the 89 observers and the 84 observers. Like I need a vote here because
I
you
need
know
a
the other thing is you understand lucha libre, which I think that demographic as far as his voters might be getting a little smaller as far as who really understands lucha. So that's why I also think
I'll email him next year. I'll email him next year. You know, right around what maybe September-ish, around there.
Yeah, I think we got our ballot in early October.
Yeah.
All right, Saturday night's main event was taped on September 21st, shown October 14th. I personally got the dates screwed up, so I didn't even watch this show, but you watched it. Main event, Hogan and DiBiase, though I think Savage and Snuka was the first match on the show.
Right. Well, yeah. And again, this was a good show. And one of the things that Dave brings up in the Observer is that 1989 was a good year as far as work rate for these shows because, you know, he goes over. I think the Brainbusters versus the Rockers had a good match. There was a few good matches in there for WWE standards, anyway. And this is no different. This was another really good show, easy to watch, an hour and 9-minute show. You know, Savage and Snuka, and I mean, yeah, Savage and Snuka, and at this time, literally Savage's job is just to put over the talent, right? He's not really getting pushed anymore. Here, that's exactly what happens. And Savage beats him, but the angle's more. Savage has just beaten Duggan for the crown, so that's the program right now. So Savage and Duggan are going around the horn for the King of the Ring, which is always weird because they had a, like you said earlier, they had a King of the Ring house show
with Tito.
but they also had a King of the Ring as far as the quote unquote championship, which was never which it was defended once in a while, but that was weird. One of the things about didn't it annoy you that the beginning of Saturday Night's Main Event was always a promo, and then they would go to the ring entrances, and they would cut another promo with the same guys that cut the promo earlier. So you would essentially get two promos for one match, and it was a lot of promos. You know,
yeah.
That always annoyed me. Then we had the world title match because we have to have it early because the kids are going to bed.
Right.
It's midnight. So we had Ted DiBiase with Zeus against Hulk Hogan. And there was your typical, you know, Ted DiBiase Hogan house show match, which was really good. So now this was weird. I've never seen this in WWF during this time. I don't know if they were tired of beating Ted DiBiase with the big boot and the leg drop, or maybe they were just tired of showing that. He beats him with a small package. Hogan just gets him in a small package and pins him 1, 2, 3. But where it gets even more weird is that, you know how like in a small package, it comes out of nowhere? They're exchanging maneuvers, and then there's somebody does a small package 1, 2, 3, and then the wrestler's shocked that he got pinned.
Yeah.
This was Hogan hulking up and literally putting DiBiase like he's gonna suplex him, and then he just gives him a small package and pins him. So I don't know if something went wrong or what, but it was awkward. I've never seen that.
So what about the part where Dave has been talking about how they want us to forget that Hogan already dropped the leg on Zeus because they need to set up Survivor Series? Did they not even mention that?
No, not whatsoever. It's literally like that match never happened.
Wow.
And then Zeus attacks Hogan, and then Ted DiBiase tells Zeus, and I quote, "break his damn neck." So he does that whole gimmick where he breaks his neck in every match, you know.
Yeah,
but it never actually breaks his neck, or maybe it does. But since it's Hogan, it just heals itself, you know.
Yeah.
So he does that again. He lays them out and he leaves them there, essentially building up for that 8-man tag at Survivor Series. Then we had Roddy Piper versus Haku. Now, Roddy Piper is one of the most racist wrestlers you're ever going to meet in your life. And he says a lot of things that he could never say today about Haku. And so this was just a match because, as we knew back in '89, if you're feuding with one member of the Heenan family, you got to go through all of them. That was the same angle they did with all the babyfaces, right? So here, Roddy Piper's feuding with Ravishing Rick Rude because he costed him the Intercontinental title at SummerSlam. So on the way to Rick Rude, which we're going to talk about in December when they have the blow-off steel cage match at the same show that we have Zeus and Hogan's steel cage match with Savage and Beefcake, he pretty much comes out here and has a quick match with Haku, and he beats him, you know. So that's
Did
that.
you remember the story where Chael Sonnen was asking Roddy Piper for advice
Yeah, and
in
then
how
he
to
gave him all kinds of stuff that he couldn't say anymore.
yeah,
You know.
and like yeah, he said if you really want to get heat, here's one, and it was the word that about Anderson Silva that would have been the worst thing that Chael could have possibly said, and yeah, that was his advice.
Yes. Yeah. The guy was out to lunch and he never really caught on. I've never shared this story here, but I've shared it in KLB. I'm a big movie buff, and I buy all these Criterion DVDs and
Yeah.
Blu-rays and stuff. So there's one where John Carpenter does a commentary track with Roddy Piper, and in
Oh,
these
for They
commentary,
Live.
yeah, for They Live, and I'm a big fan of these comment. They're not for everyone, but I love them. So in these commentary tracks, for people that have never heard them, essentially you have the filmmakers or the artists. They're talking you through the movie, and they're
Right.
talking about their motivation and whatever. Roddy Piper's talking about They Live as if it's a shoot, and John Carpenter doesn't know what to make of it. So Roddy Piper's there talking as how like he found these glasses, and he's telling the story how he found them as if it's a shoot, and but the problem is that he gets stuck at the end because his character dies at the end. So he had to finagle his way. People should seek it out and just watch it. So he
Okay,
had to
what year would he have actually done the commentary? Because that movie's from the 80s, the late 80s.
whenever DVDs got big, because DVDs
Okay.
are the ones that started, So I would say maybe mid 90s,
Okay.
around there.
Wow.
So he had to finagle his way out of explaining how he dies in that movie, but he gets to sit there and tell that story, So he does these mental gymnastics to say how, he got out of that alien craft, and he's thanking God, and he was able to sit next to John Carpenter. But there's so many plot holes even in his logic, because if that really happened, what is John Carpenter doing there next to him, who directed the movie? So John Carpenter is very uncomfortable, but he's going along with it. Like, I don't think he has a choice. You know what I'm saying? So it's so surreal, and yeah, it's a trip. But
Charlie jumped in the chat, by the way. I think he wants you to know that he's here live.
Yes, thank you, Charlie. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask them. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that was always Roddy, right? Piper was always like that.
Well, why you wonder though, why does he think that he has to do it that way? Because no, like movie stars, when they go out and they do the red carpet stuff, like they don't talk in their character's voice. I mean, maybe if you're Jim Carrey and you have to do that, but like that's not done. So I wonder, did he think there was like a movie kayfabe that?
I think so. I think he lived
Wow.
in the world of kayfabe so long that he just kind of died there.
Wow.
Honestly, but it was always, I don't know, man. With Roddy, I got one of my good friends. He always gets annoyed at that HBO interview that got him fired. Remember that one from 2004, 2003, or 2005? I'm sorry, because he's there talking about how, like, the boys, we had to do the drugs, and it's like this whole "woe is me" thing. But first of all, Roddy Piper had money, all right, and at that time, he's already in his mid 40s, 2005, and he's still talking like he's living hand to mouth, and he's talking about having to do drugs to keep up with the schedule. And this is a guy that at this point was already only working like once or twice a month, if that. So my buddy gets really upset because he's like, this guy was just a drug addict who just had to find reasons to keep on using at this point, and he's right.
How much of that do you think was trauma of his younger life, though?
Well, I'm sure it was, but there was also this awareness of him where he kind of just used that as a justification to continue living that life.
Totally.
And also, we'll never really know because he was never really honest about anything. So we don't know what kind of childhood he really had, I
always wondered if there was, like, because he was in wrestling so young. I just wonder how much abuse there was back then that he dealt with.
Well, he was one of the ones that didn't like Pat Patterson, right? And he's gone on record. He went on record as saying that, and he would just never get into details because it's Roddy. Everything has to be overly dramatic. But he was just like, I don't like what Patty, Pat did with things. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of that during that time.
Yeah.
But I think just to simplify this, he's just a guy that just never wanted to grow up. To me, that's how I see him. Just a guy that never wanted to grow up. Now, notice I said never wanted to grow up. I didn't say he couldn't grow up, or he just didn't want to. So that's right. And here he's back for his last run in the company, last big run, and he gets a pin over Hulk Hogan. And then we had Rick Martel versus Tito in their never-ending feud. It seems like, and this match is essentially there to promote the 8-man tag at Survivor Series, because Rick Martel comes out with the Twin Towers and Honky, and Tito comes out with the Red Rooster, Beefcake, and Dusty, and they have a pretty good match, as they tend to do. It actually got about the longest time, about 10 minutes, but it was really designed to hype up the Survivor Series match, because it ends up with everybody running in and fighting each other. And that's then we had the Rujos putting over the Bushwhackers in a nothing match. The Rujos putting over the Bushwhackers. This was the Rujos just doing the jobs on the way out. And that's the show. So it was a good show. They had the stars out there. Hogan had a good match with DiBiase, promoted Survivor Series. So that.
All right, I think Draven's camera may have crapped out there for a second. So I'll lead into the transition here, which is to the WCW side of things. And we mentioned earlier how Dave is writing a lot about violence. And the reason why is because TBS has requested that WCW eliminate all blood on television. And it's not only about TBS, it's also about the syndicated shows and even pay-per-view shows. Now imagine that. You're back. So I was just mentioning how Dave was writing about how TBS wanted all blood out of the product.
All right.
Which was kind of crazy that they they wanted the blood out completely from the product. And TBS runs the company, but they didn't only want the blood off of their television show, they wanted it off syndication and pay-per-view, which I always found pretty interesting. So okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, my computer went off.
No,
you're
right. Good.
Yeah.
All right, so
we had just finished covering Saturday Night's Main Event, right? So
yeah, so what did you think about TBS just saying no blood anymore? Like that was kind of a almost an overcorrection to some extent, right?
Yeah, and they went back and forth on that, right? Because remember in '88 they had the same thing, and that's what got Dusty fired. But yeah, they would go back and forth on that.
And I wonder if Rick is like, dude, like
that's his bread and butter.
Yeah, you don't understand how I stay over. Is like the blood is such a big deal. So, Kendo Nagasaki comes in as the Dragon Master, replacing Dirty Dick Slater for the funk side of business.
For Gary Hart's whatever he called him. Yeah, his stable.
And Dave's also writing a lot, and this is more towards the WCW side because of their television shows about the NFL. Like people think like this NFL competition stuff is like new, that Dave hasn't been writing about this for a long time. Wrote a lot about it in the Monday Night War era because actually WCW and WWF were competitive with the football stuff back then. But here he's writing how it's taking a chunk out of the normal TV viewing on Sundays. And so last time we talked about the limo angle with the Steiners and how Dave did not like it. But he did mention that they made up for it in how Scott was portrayed in the aftermath of it. So Scott was really bruised up in the face, and he said, "You're not going to really believe this, but they didn't want makeup because they were going to have to then wrestle, and then the makeup would come off, and it would be a little bit of the illusion. It would ruin it."
This is barbaric what you're about to say.
So instead, Scott asks Rick to rear back his right hand and punch him right in the face with the goal of shutting his eye. And that is what they did.
Yes. Isn't that crazy? I mean, Randall K did it years later with Brock, but
yeah, yes, unfortunate for Randy. But like, you remember how I was talking about that Steiner Brothers documentary and how I was like, for the Steiners, like I wanted it to be more important. They should have just led with this thing, man, in that documentary. Oh my God, like ridiculous stuff. And but this is kind of, I wonder if you ask Scott, he's got to know that they are kind of on their way, right? They're starting to get they're starting to get a lot of TV time. They did the whole angle with Robin Green, and they're on their way to the tag strap. So for Scott, he wants to show these guys that he's tough and he can take this and that he can do the job. And who better to punch you right in the face than Rick?
Yeah, but I have my brother who I love dearly, who's we're about to go to a Rams game here soon. He's a big football guy. I could never in a million years punch him in the face like that. Like I just couldn't.
Okay, what if he said, I'm going to win $1 million if you could punch me in the face and shut my eye?
Maybe, but that would be difficult. That would be difficult because
how could you not just pull it? Like, yeah,
right.
Those guys are nuts, and it's the Steiner brothers, so we know that they're nuts.
Maybe when he was an Angels fan, he went through a phase.
So is he back on the Dodgers now?
He's back on the Dodgers, he's back on I give him a break.
Okay,
a little bandwagon-y, but yeah, he was not recently. He's been back on them for a while, but not enough to say that he got back on during dark times. The Dodgers were doing pretty good when he jumped back on. Yeah, he was an Angels fan back in the when they beat the Giants, 2002-ish.
Oh,
which everybody was
my nightmare.
Everybody was an Angels fan during that time. So yeah, but yeah, no, that's insane. But what I wanted to talk about, is Dave's meltdown over the limousine thing.
Yep.
Because it's so unlike Dave to do that. Like, I don't know if he was having a bad week personally. I don't know if that was the week where he put the banana on the girl's hair.
I talked to him about that recently. We were at a breakfast for so there's a bunch of October birthdays from the people who we kind of hang out with wrestling, and we had gone to sushi for his birthday so that his significant other could come. And then we had a breakfast for the other guys who have similar October birthdays. So Dave came, and he was there with Pampero Firpo's daughter. His significant other couldn't come, so Pampero Firpo's daughter was there. My wife was there, and some of the other significant others were there. So he was talking about, just certain things in his childhood, and, people were just conversing. And I mentioned the banana and the hair thing. And so he had to tell that story to people who don't know that story and aren't wrestling fans necessarily. They'll marry Pampero Firpo's daughter. Like, she knows a lot about wrestling.
Right.
So but he had to say, she did it first. I did it after, but yeah, we put the banana in each other's hair. But he was telling stories that day for sure about, and not wrestling, because they didn't care about wrestling. He was talking about like his growing up and stuff. But
the stories that Brian would have to edit out, Dave hasn't slept in days stories.
Let me set this up for you. So what happens, and just to kind of refresh memories, I think we talked about this last time, is Scott is waiting for his brother. Robin Green's limo pulls up, and she basically says, "Oh yeah, whatever." And do you want to come in the limo? So he's like, "Okay, I'll wait for you." And they're just in like some deserted area. Like, it just seems like a random place. And so as he goes in, he gets beat up by Doom, and I think Kevin Sullivan is in there as well. And Dave's issue with this thing is, you have camera people there. Why are they just shooting this angle of this guy getting beat up? That's not realistic. Like, it just shows you where we are today. It's not realistic, and it just kind of tells you how fake the whole thing is. So he went through a whole thing, and that is what you're alluding to. So now, what else did you want to say about that?
No, it's just it was okay. So a couple things. First of all, I gotta give WCW credit because they were ahead of their time by using the the cameraman as this invisible observer, right? Like it was essentially the cameraman became us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's how we're supposed to see it. You know, in the very artistic way. But at that time, they hadn't established that because it was still wrestling. Again, the 80s, there was so many new things, you know, from these European tours with the wacky laws to the way they would tour. They would be in Miami one on a Saturday, and then on a Sunday they would be in LA. It was just so people were throwing stuff against the wall, and this was something that they tried. And you know, who would ever be able to say that this would be the wave of the future? Because now we have backstage vignettes all the time. So in one sense, it's genius of WCW to do this. But at that time, without the context that I just explained, yeah, like why are these guys just standing there watching this? You know, it doesn't make any sense because there's a criminal act, legitimate criminal act, and they did try to explain it the following week. And then another thing that really rattled Dave was that they were only shooting Doom's legs. They were not shooting the entire body.
Yeah.
But then later on, they said, well, that's because the cameraman went to ask for help, right? And so that's why they had to drop the cameras down, or at least one of them did. And then that's why you only saw their legs. That's what it said in the following week's Observer when they were trying to explain what happened.
Mm-hmm.
So kudos to them for even trying to explain it, because in years later, they wouldn't even try it anymore. We just have to accept that the cameraman doesn't exist. So yeah, but I don't know, but Dave was really pissed. It wasn't like a passing comment. Remember, he said he had never turned off a show up until this time, and he just couldn't watch it anymore.
Yes.
So I'm like, dude, why are you so like bent out of shape over this? Like, and he was just very upset. And I guess another thing that's weird is that it kind of made him seem out of touch a little bit. But then again, he didn't know this would be the wave of the future. He didn't know that this would be the norm. But it's very unusual for Dave not to see these patterns starting to develop, you know, and so he was just pissed. I think he felt like we will never see this kind of angle again because it was so insulting to the audience, but it became the norm.
Can I tell you why else he may have been bothered?
And well, you should, you know what? If you have time, you should ask him if he remembers.
Yeah, I should probably ask him. I think it's because the way he views the NWA through the prism of, you know, I'm reporting the business, but if I was just a fan, I would prefer the wrestling that the NWA does. And he would think that WWF would do something more along the lines of exposing the business or whatever. And I think it's just that the product that he enjoys more and that run by people who he thought would kind of keep the kayfabe alive as much as possible were the ones who actually did it.
Yeah, which is the same thing that he's going through today with AEW and WWE. Same thing, you know.
You know what? I think he enjoys this version of WWE a lot more than he enjoyed the '89 WWF.
No, of course, but I think also now he's more conflicted because I don't think nobody could, like 2-3 years ago, nobody could predict this is how WWE was going to be, where, you know, they're never going to have the work rate that AEW or New Japan has. It's just not allowed there, right?
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of reasons, different rings, the schedule, etc. But it's just weird that now they have pretty consistently decent work rate and they have the good storylines. So now Dave is like, what the fuck is going on here, you know? But he's always gonna be more the kind of guy that enjoys his work rate, his good, you know, wrestling. So you're right. I think he saw it was beneath WCW to do something like that. Whereas that's expected in the cartoon world that is WWF. And that's really what, you know, took him for a ride, you know? So yeah, I agree with you.
Someone sent me an old Observer where he explains how he sees matches and what he grades higher. And athleticism has always been very high in that rating for him. So, we think that you think now that he cares about the athleticism. From what I saw, and I don't know how old this rubric was, but it was like athleticism in the matches was like really high up on his list, even way back when. All right, so there's
but wait a minute, but I'm trying to see, because there is a lot of like inherent bias with that, and I'm trying to kind of put it like how a real sports reporter would see the performance of the like for example like a Dylan Hernandez, for example, which me and you were just talking about, who
my
reports on the
guy.
Dodgers, constantly. Like, will you judge an Ohtani the same as you would judge a Teoscar Hernandez? And I think the answer to that is no, right? Because so what I'm trying to say is that the way Dave judges matches, that means that somebody like a Braun Strowman, he's never going to be able to have a good match. So to me, it's more, why don't we look at the limitations of the performer and what they could do to be able to do better, right, than their limitations, and judge them on that. So for example, let's say we did that. Braun Strowman, and I'm only thinking about Braun Strowman because the guy has had the last couple months, he's been really good in the ring. I don't know why, but because he's hurting, you could tell.
He can't even bend his knees these days.
Yeah, exactly. But I think as a big man, he's really good. Like, he's really doing his best. So you would have a Braun Strowman 5-star match that will not be the same as the Will Ospreay 5-star match, but nonetheless, for the limitations of a Braun Strowman, he could have a 5-star match. That's how I would do it. You know what I'm saying? So I would look at every wrestlers individually and try to judge them on that. That's kind of what they do with movies, with films. You're not gonna judge a comedy like you would judge a horror movie or a drama. It's different, criteria. But with Dave's criteria, which is his, right, respectable, it's his. You can just an opinion. It really kind of limits a lot of wrestlers, and because WWE has always been a big man territory, they have less 5-star matches or whatever.
What's the most stars Hogan has ever got? Has anyone ever looked that up before?
I think he's had some 4.
Okay.
The Sergeant Slaughter match at WrestleMania 7 was really good. Like, they both overperformed.
Yeah.
And I think Dave gave it 4 or 3.5 or 4, which for a Hogan match, 3.5 is pretty good. What other match? The Warrior match was one that everybody talks about.
I think that was a 3.5.
Okay.
If I'm remembering.
Yeah, because Dave kept on saying that it was rehearsed and Pat Patterson put it together. So anyways, yeah, Hogan has maybe in Japan, I don't know, where he has the X Bomber. I don't know.
What was the Flair Hogan cage match star rating? I wonder if that was one of the higher ones.
Stars, but remember that credit goes to Flair. It doesn't go to Hogan.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We put it on the Flair pile. We don't put it on the Hogan pile.
I'm just trying to think of, like, to kind of give examples to what you were talking about, because obviously the only thing that matters for Hogan is that all the money that he drew, not whether or not the matches were great or anything. It's just
well, now when he's in Japan, he wrestles different though.
Yeah,
like he's got a little more spunk in his step,
But it's also to keep up with those guys, because if he didn't do that, he'd get killed.
Yes, yeah, you're wrestling Stan Hansen, you got to keep up, But that shows you that he could if he wants to. That's what I'm trying to say. But no, I think it was the road schedule of that time. You're wrestling twice a day. You just got to get through it, man. You got to get through it,
Yeah. All right, 2 non-WWF, WCW things, and then we'll get to the Halloween Havoc show. 12/13. So October 13 newsletter might be the first listing in the Observer of Stone Cold Steve Austin as Steve Williams.
I was gonna get you with that one. Yes. That one stood out to me, and I was like, "That's the debut of Steve Williams." Interesting.
Yeah. And then there's a letter. That is, somebody had written it to Vern Gagne, and I guess Vern Gagne had gone on the Pro Wrestling Torch, and Wade Keller interviewed him, and the name Bruiser Brody comes up, and Vern says that Brody probably got what he deserved. What the F, dude?
Yeah, like what the hell? I mean, these guys, man.
At
Even
that
even, even
moment in 1989, at that stage, I know Vern, eventually gets dementia, but that might have been the first sign. Like, why
that
would
would have been the first
anybody
sign.
say
Yeah,
that?
yeah. No, these guys were they had ice running through their veins, man. And you had to, right? Because that was the times. But to say something like that, well, we're talking about a year, a little over a year, so it's still
Mm-hmm.
very fresh. Um, it's yeah, it's just a very cold statement to make.
Yeah. All right,
Like
Halloween
like
Havoc.
like I was gonna say, I don't care how many times somebody burns you on a takes off on you or whatever. That's just business. You don't go around saying somebody lost their lives and they deserve it. Like, how could you deserve something like that? You can't. I mean, and to say that because somebody, I don't know what their history was, but worst case scenario, he stiffed them, he walked out on them. You don't deserve death for that.
So the Halloween Havoc show, the first WCW pay-per-view where the title wasn't the draw. It's Ric Flair and Sting versus Terry Funk and the Great Muta in the Thunderdome cage match, the electrified cage match. The opener is the Z-Man, Tom
Yes.
Zink, against Mike Rotunda. Tom Zink wins in a little over 13 minutes. Dave says, Dave uses the words lukewarm and boring in this review. And he said the fans cheered the finish when Zink won, but he thinks they were cheering more that the match was over.
Yeah, 13-minute match for two guys that are not over, that are prelim guys. That's a lot to ask for. And so that's what happened here.
This pay-per-view kind of had a couple of those matches. Like that would have been, you would have just randomly seen on, WCW's Saturday show or the new Friday show. They were just like lifeless matches on pay-per-view. It's kind
Yeah,
of
but
kind of
what does that
weird.
remind you of nowadays? AEW's television, where they have these two guys. One's a jobber and the other guy's a star, and they're out there for 15, 20 minutes. Why? You know? And I get it. I get the whole counter argument. Well, in the South, they used to have guys that would be jobbers that Ric Flair would carry for a 15-minute great
Yeah.
matches. But that was Ric Flair. That was there's only one Ric Flair.
Yeah.
And also a lot of these prelim guys in the South, they had charisma. Some of these guys that Tony has don't have charisma. And so we have to see them, they're getting squashed or be somewhat competitive for 15, 20 minutes, but they're still going to lose. And we know that.
Beef? You're not a fan of beef?
No, I'm not. I don't care about beef. I'm trying to avoid all kinds of beef right now is what I'm trying to do, from my own health reasons.
For your own diet.
So,
all right. Second match, Simone SWAT team and the Simone Savage against Midnight Express and Dr. Death Steve Williams. So we're in the storyline of Jim Cornette kind of playing both sides with the Midnights and with the dynamic dudes.
right.
And so the finish is that Stan Lane, and this is little bit of waiting a little bit too much, but Stan Lane hits a move and Jim is on the apron and he's looking right at Jim. Jim's got the tennis racket. And then I don't remember which of the Samoans got behind him and shoved him into Cornette. So Stan Lane hits the tennis racket. Cornette, the tennis racket hits, and then Cornette throws it in the air.
Right.
And he takes a bump, and they lose a match that way. But what you think about the Samoans here?
No, I mean they're good. I mean the Samoans were always pretty good. This is '89. They would be about 2 years away from going to the WWF. They were pushed pretty heavily during this time because they would be in the Future Shock tournament in December for Starrcade, and they do have a pinfall victory over the Road Warriors in this time too.
Yep.
So they were definitely behind them.
So a young Rikishi is in this match. Sam Fatu, is that Jacob's dad?
Sam Fatu? No, I don't think so. Jacob is from like one of the sisters.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm
Sam Fatu, who would be his kids? I don't know his kids actually, but they're in the business because they're all in the business. So
Yeah,
so
absolutely, they are in the business.
yes,
Sam Fatu is the twin brother of Rikishi.
yes, the Samoan
Um,
Savage.
no, Sam is the father of Jacob.
Oh, okay, I had it
I'm
wrong.
just unless Wikipedia is wrong, but I just went to I
No,
went
you're no,
immediately to
yeah, no,
Wikipedia,
yeah, but let's believe we could. Yeah, no, for sure. Um,
and I guess he's got a daughter, Journey, who also wrestles in the
that's
Independents.
yeah. So I was thinking about that as well. Yeah, but I don't know that whole bloodline is so hard to keep track of. So
Sam is the older brother of Umaga.
yes, yes. See
Wow,
that lineage I know. That generation I know. Like I could feel
it's an amazing lineage. Like it's ridiculous how successful these guys are in wrestling.
yes.
It's
And The Rock has
it almost feels like an aberration, like something that shouldn't like it shouldn't be it's off to the right on the charts. Like it's like what is this? Like
it's like the
why did
Wayne's
this work?
brothers. They just keep on popping up with more of them, you know. But
Charlie does have a quote for you, by the way, about your beef statement. I remember Draven saying during COVID he would get burgers delivered every day.
yes,
That was
and
me
look at where
too.
it got me. Look at where it got me. I mean,
Burgers are delicious, though.
yes, they are, but not every day. And I was having them every day. What else is there to do when you can't go outside? You know, and you got the
Nothing.
DoorDash technology. You just order burgers and
Yeah,
watch wrestling and horror movies. And
exactly.
I got caught up in that loop, and my belt sizes went up.
You know how I do it though? I just do it without the bread, which is it's not as fun, but that's how if we have burgers, that's how I'll do it.
So I'm gonna share the story, classic story. So when I visited my buddy Danny over in Florida
Yeah.
for WrestleMania, he took me to this Cuban place, right? Very, very traditional. And by traditional I mean conservative. And he walks in there. There's a lot of beautiful women serving the food, and he says he wants a burger without a bun. Now, these women are probably illegals. Be real about it.
Yeah.
They couldn't believe that a man, would order a bunless burger. They that they started giggling in front of Danny, mind you, and me, and they started whispering, and it went around the entire staff that this man had the gall to order a burger with no buns.
Just don't like you can order it and then just not use the bun. Like what's the
I don't
like
know, but he didn't want a bun, and so, but I was in awe because the place was so traditional. It was like an old school Cuban place,
Yeah,
and
why would you go there? I mean, maybe he just knew that you would enjoy
no,
it, but
he loves it, and he took me. It was like
like
authentic Cuban food.
like if I'm gonna go to a Cuban restaurant, I'm eating like rice and beans and the whole
Yeah,
shebang. I'm not
he got a
getting
bunless
a
burger.
hamburger.
But it's funny because, and every place like this has this old man who's
Yeah.
reading the paper in the corner, right?
Yeah.
So eventually the whispers got to him, and he puts the paper down, and he sizes up Danny, and he just does this and just continues to read the paper. Like that's the funniest shit I've ever seen.
Was Danny also wearing his flip flops?
Yeah, he's wearing his chagletas and his empty hammer pants, just like he always does. But oh man, but you're right though. You're right. I mean, we gotta think about our health nowadays,
Yeah.
especially because of where we're at right now as a country. I mean, these big pharmaceuticals, we don't want to be indebted to them in any way. So we got to take care of ourselves. So yeah, I mean, I gained a whole bunch of weight in that diet that he was talking about, and now I'm, I did lose some weight, which is good, and now I'm on the way back.
COVID
So
was a punishment, man. Like it was like all of our sins, man. That was a tough time, emotionally, mentally, physically.
yeah, man,
All my
yeah,
wife and I did was just we get home. Well, we were home, but we'd finish work. We'd open up a bottle of wine and we'd watch TV and sit on the couch. And that's what we did every single night. What was a weekend? Every day was the weekend. Like you're just
yes.
drinking wine every day. It was not healthy at all.
I think there was, and now in hindsight we think about it and we're like, oh shit, like we're really messed up. I think there was like a lot of passive depression. Like we were just trying to do our thing every day, but it was like, what are you gonna do? Everybody's working from home. There's no social interaction. and yeah, I mean,
It
there's a
was
lot of tragedies that came out of that too.
It was one of those moments where you were like, okay, it's bad, but where's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow? We didn't know. We were just like, I don't know. And so it's like we couldn't go, well, we just got to get through this for this amount of time and then we'll be fine. It was like impending. It was like doom, like just impending doom. And yeah, that messes with your brain, man. Like, remember just being able to like go outside and go on walks and wearing masks and stuff, but just like going outside and feeling kind of okay with going outside was like a step. It felt like, oh, freedom. And then, seeing somebody and saying hi to them felt like another. It was crazy.
It was very odd. Yeah, what a weird time. And every year that passes, I mean, what now we're about to be 6 years away from that, which is so weird, huh? Because it's almost like we're at the at the early tip of 10 years, and it's like it seems like just yesterday we're going through this.
Yeah, totally. My friend Lady B is in here, and she saw the video, and she was glad that we're talking about 89 Hogan and we're not talking about 2024 Hogan. Yeah, we wouldn't be talking about 2024 Hogan.
Although I don't think he would be a good what was it, the Department of Health, because he's a liar, and he's also, his body's all messed up. Like, he's not a good representative of good health.
Yeah,
I don't think he is.
He's in his mid 60s and he's still taking steroids for what?
I think he's 70 now.
Is he 70
or close to it? Yeah.
Oof, yeah, man. All right, so the third match, and this is one of the ones that I was talking about, where it's like, this is not even worthy of like being a television main event. Tommy Rich against the Cuban Assassin with the Fez press.
This is like getting I'm gonna put this in modern times with AEW. This is like getting Brian Cage versus who's the guy that's like not over at all, like Beef. Brian Cage versus Beef for 15 minutes.
Yeah, it was bad, and it's unfortunate because Tommy Rich just had that great match with Lex on the previous Clash, and I guess it's like, well, what do we do? Put it on the pay-per-view? No, not against the Cuban Assassin,
who's been a prelim guy for years and would continue to be a prelim guy.
Was the Cuban Assassin on any other pay-per-views?
Yeah, he was. I'm sure he snuck in here and there, in 1990 especially. Yeah,
I remember him on some clashes for sure. He was on those shows. So the Freebirds retain their NWA tag team titles by beating the Dynamic Dudes in just under 12 minutes. There's some very interesting things about this match. One of this Philly crowd just takes a dump on the poor Dynamic Dudes. Just no chance whatsoever for these baby faces. And I think Johnny Ace is like working with like a separated shoulder or something. Like, he's got some issues going on with his shoulder and they can't get anything. And Jimmy Garvin decided that because the crowd is not going for the dudes and they're actually going for the Freebirds, this was his opportunity to like soak in these cheers. This dude was strutting and posing and asking for more cheers. Like, man, he I don't know, he's trying to turn them into baby faces or whatever, but these poor Dynamic Dudes.
Maybe somebody in Philadelphia knew the real Johnny Ace, and that's why they booed him, horribly during this time.
Actually, I got it wrong. It was Shane Douglas who was working with his right arm that was broken. So he was actually working on an arm that he broke, kept working on it, broke it again. And so it's a twice broken arm that he had just tried to heal up for this match. These guys are nuts, man.
I think he tried to ride that skateboard they would never ride. That would really upset me as a little kid. It's like, just why don't they never ride the skateboards? Jesus. But actually, that would be it for them. Interestingly enough, Shane Douglas would end up in the WWF about a year after this.
Is this the Dean Douglas or before?
No. This was Shane Douglas, just regular Shane Douglas.
Okay.
And he would actually replace Shawn Michaels when Shawn Michaels had that knee injury that Hercules, messed up with the chain. And then he would have about a 6-month run in the WWF. Yeah, so that's his story. And then Johnny Ace would go to Japan and become a big star in all Japan.
Okay, so then the next match is actually Lady B just asked the same question that we were wondering about Hogan's highest star rating match in the Observer. So Lady B, we think it might be Flair and Hogan in the cage in WCW, but somebody will look that up.
But that's a Flair match.
Yeah, but that is a Flair match. So the fifth match is Doom beating Rick and Scott Steiner. Butch Reed gets the foreign object from Woman, and he puts it in his mask, and he headbutts. Just headbutt Rick. He headbutts Rick, I think, and he gets the pin. So in this match, Scott Steiner does the Frankensteiner.
I'm looking him up, and you'll never believe. This is an era that everybody forgets about. You'll never believe what's a very, very high.
Okay. Hogan. Because you said that, I'm gonna say Hogan and Jericho.
No, it's Hogan and Sting at Bound for Glory 2011.
That's the highest rated.
Yes.
How many stars did they get?
No, it's not the highest rated. It's one of the highest because it's 3.5.
Wow.
Because
because you made me think that there's a run where Hogan does matches with Brock Lesnar and Chris Jericho that were probably better than expected, and he also does that tag run with Edge, so those matches will be inflated because Edge is working with good wrestlers and Hogan is just doing the hot tag.
One that we don't think as good, but they rated it pretty high because Shawn was a total clown in the match, was the one with Hogan at SummerSlam.
That one makes sense. 2005.
They've gave it 3.5. Let me see if I could find. Let me see another random. The Rock and Hogan got 3 stars. Yeah, so he's not gonna get He's not gonna get 4 stars.
Wow.
He has a couple negative 5-star matches on here with the Warrior at Halloween Havoc, and then Bret Hart and Hogan and Stevie. Oh, the War Games, that horrible War Games match. Man, he's got a lot of negative star matches.
Negative 5 stars. Yeah, the Hollywood Hogan and Ultimate Warrior Halloween Havoc 898.
Yeah, man, he never got out of 3.5. He never got out of 3.5. So that's as much as he's got.
I wonder if I ask Dave, like on one of the shows, you know, what in your mind is Hulk Hogan's greatest match? I wonder what he would say.
Like on the spot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because usually when you put him on the spot, he would just it's better because he'll give you like a stream of conscience opinion.
Mm-hmm. Oh, even the Mr. McMahon match at WrestleMania 19 was 3 stars, and that was just a no rules match, no holds barred match or whatever it was.
So Hogan and Vader from Super Brawl 5 got 3.5 stars. I forgot about that match.
That's a good match. But is that the match with the funky finish where somehow Flair loses, or is that
No, that's the following month in the strap match.
That's right.
Yeah, where he's dressed like a woman and he loses somehow.
All right, we went on quite a tangent. All right, so so what I was getting to was Scott Steiner does the Frankensteiner in this match.
Yes.
And it doesn't lead to a finish, it's just a high spot. And so do you know what Dave called it in his review?
Oh, he didn't call it a Uran con Rana?
No, he did not.
What did he call it?
The Mata Head Scissors. But then he said right after, somebody really needs to come up with a better name for the move than the Mata Head Scissors.
So it came from Japan.
When does it become Frankensteiner? Soon. It's got to be soon.
It's in the Clash, because the Clash, I remember, I just watched it and they actually named it the Frankensteiner.
Okay.
So the Clash from Troy, New York is where they call it the Frankensteiner.
There we go. So it's coming. All right, Lex Luger beats Brian Pillman in a pretty good match. It wasn't quite the Tommy Rich match or the Barry Windham match that we saw earlier this year.
Right.
Lex, but Lex is kind of on fire.
He's really good here, man. He's really good.
It's a really, really good match. He looks amazing. Like, how does somebody have that low of body fat? It's like ridiculous.
And Jim Ross will remind you every time he wrestles.
Yes. But man, like it's something good for Brian Pillman too, because and they do mention this in the match, just the size difference and how it'd be closer in weight if Brian Pillman was still an offensive lineman like he was in college, but he's slimmed down to become a wrestler. And that whole story that they would tell a lot with Brian Pillman over the years. But I thought this was a really good showing of Brian and just another great showing from Lex.
You know what? They needed to bring his head coach in college to be his mouthpiece during this time, and he would have gotten over as the greatest wrestler of all time, guaranteed.
Oh, you talking about Kim Wood?
Yeah, Kim Wood, man, that guy was amazing at that dark side of the ring, like amazing.
I told you, I've talked to that guy. He's exactly
so he's in full gimmick 24/7.
Oh my
right?
God, dude, it was insane. And then what some people might have probably never thought they'd see, the Road Warriors and Skyscrapers. What a I don't know, what would you compare that to? We don't see matches like this anymore.
No, we don't. This is a big deal, and again, this is all about pushing Big Sid, right? This is the guy they see the future in, so he gets kind of a big deal here. But the Road Warriors still win. So
yes, they won by DQ. So Sid, and I didn't realize this because Sid's working style was really slow and plodding and clotheslines and bear hugs, but he kips up in this match, like from his back to his feet, and you didn't see that a lot back then, but he does that in 1989 in this match, which was maybe the most impressive thing in the match. Lots of these guys are not on the same page. There's a corner spot where
anytime Road Warrior Hawk's in the ring, he's not going to be on the same page with anyone. He always wrestles like that, right? Have you noticed that? Like he always wrestles like he's on the same page.
So there's a corner spot. Road Warrior Hawk gets thrown in the corner. I think Spivey comes with a clothesline in the corner, and Sid is going to follow up with the clothesline in the corner. But as Sid is running to the corner, Road Warrior Hawk slumps down on his butt, so Sid's got to like change his move in midair, and it sucks.
Yes,
stuff like that. But at the same time, this is like the irresistible force meeting the immovable object kind of match for WCW at that time. It wasn't an impressive match from the perspective of like a wrestling match, but it was impressive seeing these four giant dudes, in the ring together.
What was the thing that the AEW fans were like? What was it? Meat? Like trying to get over that term, meat. And I don't know, man. I just know that if my very super conservative dad was watching wrestling with me, and he heard a bunch of men saying meat to other men, he would give me a look. That's all I got to say about that. But another thing I wanted to say, contrary to popular belief, is that Sid Vicious and The Undertaker never teamed up, because I know when they wrestled at WrestleMania 13, it was the skyscrapers collide.
Right,
but actually,
right.
Taker came in to replace Sid, and he actually teamed with Dan Spivey.
Yes.
So Sid, Taker and Sid actually never teamed up.
Right.
It would have been cool if they did, but they just never did.
Did they teamed up in WWF though, right?
Yes, they did too. No, they didn't, because Taker was already a babyface when Sid was in there. It was what we had was Hogan and Taker against Sid and Flair around the Horn in '92.
Right. Okay, the main event is Flair and Sting against Great Muta and Terry Funk. Bruno Sammartino is the referee in this match. That's crazy.
The man who sold out all the clubs, as he calls them, all over the Northeast. And if you don't believe him, he'll tell you.
He will. One of the greatest guests in Wrestling Observer Radio history.
Him, Tom Zank. Who was the other one? There was a few that were return guests. They were just a gold mine to that.
I've told you that my favorite person to talk to was Kenny Omega.
Really?
From the perspective of, if you ask a thoughtful question, he's gonna really try and give you a thoughtful answer. So like for a reporter or something, like he's just a dream to talk to, because he doesn't give you short answers. He really, really thinks. Now, some of his answers are probably too long, but Bryan Danielson.
That was gonna say that would be my choice, because he's always honest. He doesn't care if he buries himself or the promotion. He's gonna say what's on his mind. And Kenny's the same way too, because I know that in Kenny's interviews, they've tried to bait him into talking trash about WWE, and he won't do it. Like if he's not, he only does it when he's feeling it, right? And so he's very authentic in that way. But he's put over Roman Reigns a bunch of times,
Yeah.
you know, and he's put over a lot of his other contemporaries in the WWE. So you're right. No, I agree with you. He is a good interview. He's very authentic. You know, I think there's a difference between being smart and being authentic, and I would rather listen to an authentic interview.
The opposite, so kind of what you're talking about.
TK is the opposite of everything we just talked about.
Well, TK is wild, but Cody is very reserved and measured when he answers questions. And
Yes.
that doesn't mean that he's not going to give you something, but you can tell that he's not going to be off the cuff like those other two guys are.
Yes.
And I got the chance to interview. I was mostly helping Dave with the Cody interview. I wasn't really that involved in that one, but I was really involved in the Omega and the Danielson ones, which were I thought were really, really excellent. I'm trying to think of who else would be in that Bruno category.
Well, that's what like Lady B's saying here. Yeah, Cody is media trained, and on top of that, I do feel that Cody feels a responsibility to the company. In other words, he feels like he helps feed all the other mouths in that roster, right? So he can't just think about himself. You know, he can't be selfish in that way. He's got to think about the entire company because he sees himself in that role.
Yeah,
you know?
I think the today's version of Cody, absolutely 100%. The Cody that we interviewed was the New Japan Cody.
Oh,
and
okay.
I think what he was worried about, which is kind of what these guys are always worried about, which is if they do this interview, and this is pre AEW as well, and that's the big point. Cody was gonna make sure that he didn't say anything that got back to WWE because he knew eventually that's where he wanted to be, and this is the time frame where Vince is holding grudges with a lot of people, so he didn't want to say anything probably that would piss off Vince necessarily from eventually getting a job back there when he built himself back up. That would be my guess.
No,
But
yeah. And in that sense, he's smart, but it's
Yeah.
not authentic. And like I said earlier, I'd rather have an authentic interview than a smart interview because a smart interview could be very political, which is cool because you have an agenda and you need to accomplish that.
He's promoting himself also, which is part of the gig.
But Bryan Danielson and Kenny Omega, man, they're gonna speak from the heart, and they don't care. Again, they'll bury themselves if they have to. And I like that because that's a human being, and we connect with human beings, So yeah,
I would say Mick, but we only had about 30 minutes with Mick, and it was when his mentor Dominic DeNucci passed away.
Okay.
I knew more about Mick's career and the things that he was doing, and he didn't know that I did. So I was like setting him up for stuff. So that was really fun because I was like, okay, I can sort of feel where he's going with this story because I've heard it before. So let me set him up to kind of hit that home run. So that was a lot of fun. It was almost like an improv act in a sense because I just knew what he was going to say, where he was going with certain things. So that was fun too.
You know what you don't have to deal with that the old Ayala did because these guys are not around anymore. The old timers that were super old that would get lost in the air. And, a lot of time, the thing that me and Danny would always laugh is how, remember with them, it was like Dave and Brian were the same guy.
Yeah.
Always, it was Dave. Even if Brian asked, well, Dave, yeah. So, but also it got kind of like sad when they would kind of ramble on, and they would, it's old people, and so. Yeah, that's something because they're not around. These people are not around anymore, so you don't really have to deal with that. I can't think of anybody.
I got that a little bit with who was the Fuller? Not Ron Fuller. Who's the other Fuller? The brother.
Not Colonel Rob Parker, the other one.
Yeah, the other one.
Yeah, well, I know you're talking about.
Maybe it was Ron. Was it Ron? Maybe it was Ron.
Because it's Rob and Ron.
Yeah, he didn't know who I was. Obviously, I was just kind of helping. But the one who was really good about like listening for the difference of voice, and he was older. Jerry Jarrett was a friggin' pro. That dude was he was pro.
He was sharp to the end. Yeah, he was sharp to the end.
Yeah, I remember that one very clearly, thinking like, "Wow, Jerry Jarrett is like actually saying my name like as I'm talking to him." And
Yeah.
who else did we do? Steve Kern was the same way. He would say my name, and but we're doing those like Steve Kern one was video, so he could see when I would talk. But
Right.
and then the one that we did with Ric Flair, where we got a lot of heat just because we did it with Ric Flair.
Yes, but
at
Steve
that
Kern
time.
But Steve Kern is still active. He still has to be alert. So
Yeah.
I would imagine he would be a good interview too. He's not. He's
Yeah.
not. He's
And
not somebody who
his book, you would really like both of his books, by the way, just because of that time frame and the territories he worked in. Very interesting. All right, we went way off a tangent on this one, but okay. Flair and Sting beat Funk and Muta. So this match, the part of the draw on this match was that there was this electrified steel cage. Now we did see fire in the very beginning. And was it referee Tommy Young who was trying to put the fire out? Is that who that was?
Yes. And a visual that I remember as a 8-year-old kid at this time. I'll never forget it. And this might have done more for Muta than winning the main event at the Tokyo Dome.
Yep.
Like, he put out the fire with the mist. He got up there and he just blew it, and it went. And I remember as a little kid, just like that was like such a cool thing to see.
Yep.
And it's for that, since that moment, like Great Muta has been in my head as far as one of those guys. Like, I can't believe I saw that. Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. But what about the fact that there was a fire in a professional setting? Like, Jesus Christ.
They were promising like electricity. Like, if you get too high up on this cage, you could get shocked. And I think Muta does get shocked once.
Yes.
I don't know if that was real or fake. I'm going to guess it was real.
But was it planned or not? We don't know.
Right. I don't know. I think maybe he just touched the wrong thing that he wasn't supposed to touch or whatever. But there wasn't much any more of that. So the idea of this match was each team had someone who was holding the white towel, and the only way you could lose the match is if your person threw the towel into the ring.
They had a wacky name for those people. What was it?
Oh, I'll find it.
They had a wacky name for them, for the cornermen.
Terminators. They were the Terminators. So the match is a good match. It's Terry Funk just trying to bump like crazy for this
looking
crowd.
Jacked, by the way. He was during this time.
In fantastic shape.
Yes.
And just had gotten off not only the back injury, but then was in the hospital because he had the what do you call it? He had the open wound. What is the?
Oh yeah, the bacteria.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. I forget what they call it. And Muta is just in his athletic prime. Sting in his athletic prime. Flair is he and Terry were a little. They wanted to show the aggression and the hatred for each other. So this is a really good match. The problem is, and this is just the way that stuff like that was shot back in the day. There's so many things happening that the camera director isn't always on the proper shot. So you're missing some stuff. From what I understand, inside the arena, it was, you're kind of like just head on a swivel looking back and forth on the stuff. So in the end of the match, Sting's got, Ric Flair's got.
But let me ask you this before you move forward to the end. Doesn't it annoy you when you have a match like this where there's electricity and all this stuff, and they actually follow the rules of a tag team match?
Yeah.
Like, to me, it's like, why are you doing that? And then at the end, it kind of, it settles into a 4-way brawl anyway, right? So I don't know. That always, they do it to this day. Both companies.
It's like Alvarez's spiel about when you have the heel ref. Why doesn't the heel ref just count to 3 real fast on the first try and then the match is over? Like, why?
I hate that stipulation. I hate that stipulation. That's one of the stipulations that I hate the most.
Yeah,
might be the one that I hate the most, actually, because once you announce the ref, it's any ref, not just the heel ref, then the match is gonna suck because it's all about the ref, right? Mm-hmm. That's why when Seth Rollins was named the ref with Punk and McIntyre, I'm like, this match is gonna suck, and it did suck. But here in this match, they're following the rules and they're waiting for the hot tag, and I'm like, bro, it's a Thunderdome match. Just go in there and brawl, which you're gonna do anyway, and they did. To the point where there's a spot where Terry Funk is hammering Sting, but he makes sure that he stays in his corner. Like, he doesn't want to leave. And I'm like, just go do it. But it's just wacky wrestling from that time, and it is what it is.
So the finish is Sting's off the top rope. Flair's got Funk in a figure 4, so Funk can't get out. So Sting's just doing these big splashes off the top rope, and Terry's just selling like a maniac. It's awesome. And so Gary Hart and Ole Anderson, the Terminators. Gary Hart like goes on to the apron, and Ole goes on to the apron, and then they fight. Ole punches Gary Hart, and Gary Hart does the same thing that Jim Cornette did with the tennis racket. Instead of figuring out a way for this thing to just fly out of your hand, he's got to throw it. So he throws it up in the air, and it falls on the back of Bruno. And so Bruno sees the white flag, and he says, the heels wave the white flag. And so the baby faces win. But right before that, the way that Bruno gets turned around is established in the very beginning of this match. Muta and Bruno had like kind of like a spot where they kind of bumped into each other. So Bruno was already like, oh, I got to watch out for this guy. And so in the end, the reason why Bruno didn't see what was going on is because Muta tried to fight him, and he moved out of the way, and then he punched Muta, and then all that stuff was happening in the background. That is how you keep the referee not seeing all of that stuff, which we don't see enough of in today's wrestling.
No, you're right. You're right. Especially in New Japan, when Evil's wrestling. But what about those Popeye arms that Bruno still has to this day, man? They're pretty impressive,
dude. I remember Dave was saying that he talked to Bruno about when he should stop lifting heavy weights. And so Dave said, because there's been times in Dave's where he's kind of on lifting and off lifting, and Dave has crazy genetics, so he still is cut, even if he doesn't have like that giant, like those giant arms. He's still pretty cut, and he's got just diet is off the charts, so he's always lean as well. So he was telling Bruno, like, gosh, I'm getting so sore, and Bruno's like, yeah, man, once you get to like 50, you got to go light. And he's like, well, what's light? He's like, yeah, you got to go down to like 50-pound dumbbells. And Dave's like, that's light? Like, what are you talking about? That's not light.
No, that was Bruno, though.
Yeah, that was Bruno. All right. So that is Halloween Havoc. Very fun show. I don't know if it was I would call it a great show, but
no, it wasn't a great show. It was a fun show, though.
There was something for lots of different fans, like that
Tommy Rich versus Cuban Assassin match kind of took it out of it.
Yeah, they could have pulled out 2 of those matches, and the show would have been
Tom
really
Zhang versus IRS. I didn't like either.
All right, we did get 2 questions before we get to the Only in the Observer situation. Charlie wanted to know, did we give our thoughts on the Vinny doc?
I don't think we talked about it. No, actually we didn't. I mean, to me, it's just, if you're a hardcore fan, like, what you're not gonna learn anything new except for the Shano stuff. The Shano stuff was on you. But I mean, when I first heard about
if you believe the Shano stuff, I guess, like supposedly they got Vince said, you're gonna have to stab me in the back or whatever, or,
I mean that, but I could see Vince saying that. I don't know the man personally, but I've heard enough stories. I could totally see that. And then you think about the relationship, how Shane McMahon just left sudden. I mean, yeah, it all makes sense to me. I believe it. Whether or not it's true, I don't know, but I believe it. But when I first heard about this, and I was texting you about this, because we both knew, because we know how the film business works. There's certain things they're not going to talk about. It has to be marketed a certain way. But I thought it was gonna be about Vince. It ended up somewhere along the line. It delved into being about the WWE, which is not really. But I was thinking, here we go. We're gonna find out about Randy Savage and Stephanie. That's what I thought. Like, I was excited for that. I really enjoyed the first 2 episodes, even though we knew everything. I don't know, for some reason that I'm very nostalgic for. The opposite is about episodes 3 and 4. I'm so burned out on the Attitude Era, the whole Bischoff thing, like, because I lived through that, so I'm burned out on that.
Well, what about Austin not believing in CTE?
That was weird.
Well, it came out of left field,
and he didn't get any heat for that. That guy's Teflon, man. He doesn't get any heat for anything. Maybe because he's all into cats now on his Instagram. But yeah, he never gets any heat for nothing. If that would have been someone else, that would have been the big headlines, with the wrestling media. But with him, it was just, he doesn't believe in that, and it just got brushed off, even though it's a big deal. And I think it's a very ignorant statement You know, there's proof that that thing's real. You can't just say that. But then again, to play devil's advocate, because I did kind of catch the cut. I think he was misquoted in that. I think they got two scenes and they spliced them together for dramatic. Yeah, because there's a cut.
Interesting.
There's a cut. Like, he's talking about something that just cuts, and he's like, I don't believe that. And I was like, what the hell? That's kind of weird. So who knows? Who knows what happened there? But it never became a big deal anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, to me, the thing that really bothered me when it comes to, like, you know, social justice stuff is how, and I told you about this, is how nobody took Tony Atlas seriously about what he said. I was very disturbed by that, because had it been a female, regardless of her reputation, even if she was a liar or whatever, like Tony is, we still would have taken her word for it, you know, because we live in a society that's more observes that more, you know, and understands that. But because it's Tony Atlas and he's a guy and he's kind of a clown, we all just laughed it off. And then Pat Patterson's innocent. So that tells me that when it comes to men's rights, you know, we still have a long way to go, especially when it comes to that subject.
Well, sexual abuse in that way, there hasn't been a lot of like, you don't hear a lot of stories about that to kind of, and you don't want to normalize that stuff, but you know, so you just hear it so much more from the male to female scenario. And, you know, which is the last, you know, part of Vince's life that we're talking about right now.
And I think through it all, because of the times that we're in, I mean, he might get away with it, you know. I mean, who knows? He's got the connections now.
Yep.
So and it just messed up, you know. It's just messed up because.
Okay, here's a question.
Go ahead.
Does he get back in with WWE?
Yes, for his legacy.
Wow.
For his legacy.
So.
But my concern is that it's gonna start off as like, right, because deep down, I think there's people in the WWE, people that are close to him, Paul, for example, that want to preserve his legacy. You want to be able to once again say that Vince created this, you know. But my concern is that he's gonna use that to slither his way back into creative and all that stuff, you know. And that's just Vince. I mean, he's another Teflon, you know. He just you can't hurt this guy.
You think you got him, and we'll see.
I wonder if every time I use the word Teflon, like the younger people are like, "What the fuck?"
They don't know what you're talking about.
Whatever, man.
He's impervious.
Yes, I'll use that one. He's impervious to punishment because he just gets away. Nothing sticks. How about this? Nothing sticks. All right,
nothing sticks. All right, we're gonna save these last two questions from Jay Boba when we do the other questions from the KLB. Let's quickly get to our segment.
What's in the Observer?
Only in the Observer.
Yeah, how's it going, everybody? Dave Meltzer here for the next 2 hours. We're going to be talking pro wrestling.
You know, I'm going to give you a deep cut right now. I want you to one day surprise me with the Buffy the Vampire Slayer theme song.
Oh.
Yeah.
I definitely have it somewhere.
Yeah. Did Dave did he say why he used that song? Because I always thought he was a Buffy fan, but I don't think it was his.
They
just assigned him that song, right? Yeah, okay. I figured.
This first, so for people who haven't watched this show before or listened to this, I like to pull nuggets out of the Observer that you would never see printed in any other newsletter or any newspaper. It's only the wackiness of wrestling and only the wackiness of Dave's reporting.
But there's a Hall of Fame only in the Observer that will never be topped, and people have to listen to the archives to realize what that is.
Are you talking about the Gary Von Erich one?
No, I'm talking about the NWA one.
Oh yeah.
That will never be topped. Anyways, go ahead.
Okay, so he writes, got a first this week. A wrestler called to complain because a star grade for a match was too high. He didn't say he or she, but women's wrestling is not prevalent in 1989. So I'm gonna guess he complained because it was no more than a 1-star match, all walking and talking, but we gave it 2 stars. See, people think that, like, you know, that Dave didn't have any of these connections and stuff, but he literally had a wrestler call him to say, dude, you gave me too high of a star rating.
It had to be a WWF wrestler.
You think so?
Yes.
What if it was Hogan?
No, it wasn't going to be Hogan. It wasn't gonna be Hogan. I feel like it had to be one of those people that are legitimately good, humble people. Because remember, good, humble people, they always minimize a lot of what they do. And it's those horrible people that always build themselves up. So Hogan's definitely complaining about he wants more stars, you know?
I would have said someone like Brett, but I don't know that Brett and Dave had a relationship yet. That would happen about 8
I don't think
years
it was
later.
Brett. Brett's the biggest egomaniac there is in the business.
I
mean,
was
the guy-
thinking, could have been Owen if you're talking WWF, but it would have had to be a couple of months prior to that.
I could see Owen.
Yeah.
But I can't see Owen getting a 1-star match. See, we have to think about who's bad enough to get a. I think Owen just getting into the ring is going to get at least 2.5.
What about What about
or
Henning?
Brett wouldn't get a 1-star match, or Henning. I mean, it depends who they wrestle, right? Yeah, if they wrestle like Dave used to call him back, if they wrestle slugs.
Terry Taylor. What about Terry Taylor?
No, his ego's too big. He's the cock of the walk. Why do you think they call him the Red Rooster?
Okay, this is a fun one, and you would have to know the movie that that portrayed this later. But he writes that Tim Willett of the Dallas office went to Mexico to do a piece with Friar Tormenta, who is the priest who wrestles and uses his wrestling earnings to fund an orphanage in Mexico. The piece will air on either TBS or one of the syndicated shows. Tormenta, who is 5'3", will be wrestling on an NWA card in Corpus Christi, Texas, against another guy he's bringing in from Mexico. From what I'm told from those who follow Lucha Libre, he's absolutely terrible.
Is he talking about Fray Tormenta being terrible, or the guy he's gonna wrestle?
Yeah, Tormenta.
Yeah. He was terrible, but I mean, the what makes him quote unquote legendary is the story, right? How he would do for the orphanage, and of course they're talking about Nacho Libre. So
Nacho Libre, the Jack Black movie, which was a comedy and not necessarily a biography about.
Right, yeah.
All right, the last of the. Observe this, or only the Observer. The current issue of Playboy has a segment on the women of wrestling, which includes Mimi Lesos, the magnificent Mimi, and Trudy Adams, Brandy May, told the girls look 75% better in the pictures, as in real life. Not that they look bad in real life. I had no idea what he was trying to say in that last sentence.
He was trying to protect himself. It was what he was trying to do. This is the best way I could put it. Okay. I think from my experience, I'm going to say that women always look way thinner in real life. I don't know if you have the same experience. Like they look.
Like television, you mean?
No, like on television. Like let's say, okay, and this is just from my own thing, right? My own thing, my own preference. Let's say a woman is attractive on television, right? Oh wow, attractive woman, as Dave used to say, pretty girl. And then you see them at a convention or something, and they're like, it's not just the usual 5 pounds of TV. It's like they're like 15 pounds skinnier, and I'm like, damn, like how are these girls healthy? You know what I'm saying? Like,
well, so I think you're right on, and I've heard. From like the wrestling perspective, and I'm, I think everyone is trying to be as in shape as they can. This is a vanity business, but you could go back to the Divas time frame, and I would hear stories on the diets that these women would go through just to stay on TV, and who will bring it back to the person who was keeping them on or off TV. They were basically on diets to please Vince McMahon's eye on if they were skinny enough to be on television. And that's an awful thing to have to deal with I'm sure models have to deal with it as well. And, some actresses, I'm sure, have to deal with it, but just like that mentality, that is psychologically damaging as well as physically damaging.
Of course.
Playboy's different. Like, you're taking your clothes off, and hopefully they got paid a nice sum. Not that they were famous wrestlers necessarily, but Yeah, I was just
Yeah,
I was trying to figure out. I was trying to figure out if he was saying.
Well, he was saying what I'm telling you. I think he was saying, because that's the reaction I have now when I see them in person. I'm not gonna kick them out of bed, as the old saying used to. They're very attractive women still, but it is a shock, right? When you see them on television or in print, and then you see them in person, and they're like a lot skinnier. And I don't know. I think that's what he was trying to say. He was saying he's not.
I thought he was trying to say that the magazine dressed them up in a way that made them look less attractive than if they were in real life. That's what I thought he was trying to say, but I wasn't sure, and you took it a different way. So,
well, you need to ask him. So let's see if he remembers that one.
Okay, so let's get to these questions, then we'll end this thing. So this,
by the way, to close off on that topic, I am very happy that we're in a time now where women are pretty much, they're in shape and they get to be who they really are, like the look wise. They get to choose how they're gonna look.
Yeah, you're talking about wrestling.
Yeah, wrestling, professional wrestling, and just in general, even actresses and not so much models, because they still have a high standard. But it's cool to see that, because now, especially for younger girls, for little girls that are looking for role models or whatnot, it's nice to see that they see what a regular woman could look like on TV. Mm-hmm. And even then, like, a woman that works really hard to stay in shape, but nonetheless, they don't have those surgeries anymore, or those nasty diets. So that's pretty cool to see.
Yeah. All right. So this is from Caesar, or how is it, Cesar? How does he pronounce his name? Let's go with Caesar. With the anniversary of his passing, any thoughts on what Eddie Guerrero? Do you have thoughts on what Eddie Guerrero represented to Latinos, like as a wrestler?
I think, unfortunately, his representation to Latinos came after his death. You were around back then. I was around. This is one of the occasions where the myth of Eddie Guerrero has grown bigger than how over he was. Because Eddie Guerrero was around for years, but the honest truth is that he was really only a top guy for 2 years, 2003, 2004.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, from all the stories, he was about to get another run on top, but then he passed away that day. Actually, in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, he was going to get the title, but then his legend grew, right? And I think the legend of Eddie Guerrero is what's inspired a lot of people, especially people of color. And so it's important. It's important that we have that hero in our lives. Not to be cynical, but the reality is that Eddie was a very troubled person, and even days before his death, I mean, he's what they used to call it, wrestling sober. Is that what that was Eddie, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, I have good memories of him, and during that time, during 2003, 2004, he was definitely, I'm going to use another outdated term, water cooler talk for a lot of the Latino community. Because I remember with my friends, one of the things that we would always talk about is the vignettes with Los Guerreros.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of stereotypes there, but they were funny, and there was a lot of charisma in there. I don't think it's something you could do today, but that's something that
our uncles or fathers would have grown up or would have known Cheech and Chong, that style of comedy. Yes. So we would have known that, and that was an extension of Cheech and Chong kind of comedy.
Of course, yeah. And so that I remember that was the big talk, and that was before he got pushed to the top. And so yeah, I mean, as far as that, we definitely had somebody to look for on TV. And then one of the things about him, and the reason why they put the strap on him, is because he was one of those guys that in certain regions, right, in those Latino markets, his numbers were out of this world. Those SmackDown numbers, that he drew huge ratings for them. And then later on, Rey Mysterio did the same thing. So as far as the draw, he was definitely a draw. But I think with him is more the legend of Eddie Guerrero that's more important than the actual person that lived in his time.
What's unfortunate about so he passes away, and the story that Dave wrote was that they were going to not allow the medicals to get out. I think WWE made a deal with the coroner's office or whatever to not allow that information to get out about what the reason was that he passed. Dave had an in with somebody and found out what happened, and it was the heart muscle gets so big and it closes off the arteries, and then he has a heart attack. But the reason is because of all the steroids and the human growth hormone that he was taking and all that stuff. And so Vince McMahon tells Vicky Guerrero that if she does not give out that information, that he would hire her. So that's how she got her job.
Yeah, just see, I mean, things like that, man. So if this guy gets away, he's got so much blood on his hands. It's not just these stories that have gotten him in trouble now. It just goes throughout the years. But yeah, and so it is unfortunate, but I'm glad we have that. I'm glad we have the legend of Eddie Guerrero, because he was a guy that was really all about the business too. Like, he's a guy that, remember I told you earlier, like, the good people, the kind-hearted people, they tend to minimize their abilities and attributes and accomplishments. He was one of those guys. There's that famous story of when Dave had dinner with them after when Worlds Collide, right?
Yeah.
And he was so hard. This guy had just wrestled like as close of a 5-star match as you're gonna get, with Art Barr and El Santo and Pentagon, and he's at dinner like just beating himself up over how much he could have done for that match to be better, and that's who he was. So the last years of his life, a lot of people don't know this, but he was in a lot of pain. He couldn't be that Eddie Guerrero anymore. That's why I always say the follow-up to this question is,
where would he be in life today?
Yeah, so he wasn't going to wrestle very much longer.
I don't think so.
I think maybe he would have closed off 2006 and that would have been it. Now I see him as an agent, First of all, man, that Guerrero family has a lot of drama, and it would have been nice for him to be there to kind of be able to figure that out. There's a lot of drama, a lot of dark
I don't think that the daughter and Vicky don't speak.
No, they don't.
I think the daughter accused Vicky's current husband of sexual abuse or something.
Yeah,
like
sexual harassment. Yeah, and it reminds me of the Hart family when they all picked sides when it came to that stuff. And here, yeah, the other daughter, I think, sided with her sister, but then it's very complicated. And it would be nice if Eddie was here to attend to. I mean, who knows? Maybe they would have gotten divorced but little things like that, But as far as in the business, yeah, he still would have been around. He would have been involved. He would have been a road agent. He would have been one of Vince's guys. Later on, one of Paul's guys. Same with Chris Benoit. Had Chris Benoit not gone with what he'd done, these two guys were lifers. They loved the wrestling business. So that's what I see of him.
I wonder how they both would have dealt with the idea of actually not being able to wrestle anymore and still being around the business, and because they loved the wrestling piece of it so much, so much more than most people. Like, just that wrestling part of it was such a big deal.
Yeah, it's hard because I always think of Sean in the same, but Sean had his family. For whatever reason with Sean, there came a point where he understood that his family was more important than the business. And that took over a lot of the meaning that he had in his life, meaning and purpose. Whereas these two guys, I mean, obviously with Chris, his family wasn't going to mean shit, right? We saw the end result of that.
Yeah.
So this is all they had, right? So I think, I think it would have gotten sad for a while. I think just their performance would have eventually gotten them out of the business. By that, I mean, eventually they were just going to get sad to watch in the ring, especially Eddie, because he had so many injuries.
Yeah.
But even Chris Benoit, I think Chris Benoit would have still been wrestling at 50. It would have just been time where it's like, yo, you got to retire. And Vince would have retired him anyway, because Vince does that to people.
And the difference between those guys and maybe someone like Rick or Hogan, they didn't care as much about the celebrity as they cared about the wrestling. And where Hogan and Rick, they just needed to be, celebrities still. They needed to be noticed in public, and they needed to, people to remind them of the good old days and stuff like that, where Eddie and Chris didn't seem like that at all.
So you know what? Now that I think about it, then with everything you just said, I agree with you 100%. And I do think we would have seen some TNA runs for both of them, because TNA was always the land of the discarded toys, right? For Vince. So they want to wrestle. It reminds me of Bryan Danielson as well. Like, these guys are going to wrestle, whether it's in front of 30 people or 30,000 people. And so I think eventually Vince would have retired both of them, right? And be like, you guys can't go anymore. They would have let their contract expire, and they would have gone a couple years in TNA. That's what I see happening. And then eventually they would have come back, the Hall of Fame, and agents and all that stuff. So that's what I think would have happened with them.
All right, we'll keep this one quick because we already talked about this one last time.
And
but
because it pains you to talk about it, you mean?
No, he's talking about beating the Yankees, which I don't really care about. But Peter H wants to know your thoughts on the Dodgers beating the Yankees. I guess there's a hardcore Yankees fan in your KLB group that he's kind of trying
Mark
to
the
nudge.
Mark. Okay, here's the deal. I wish the Giants were in the American League because I would have loved to seen. If there's any other team other than the Yankees, is the Giants that I hate the most. I just can't stand them. So if it feels even better that it's the Yankees, right? Because the Yankees are the almighty Yankees. And they were always bragging about their 27 titles and this and that. So it's nice to humble them a little bit.
Do you worry that the Dodgers might become the Yankees and be the villain because of the high payroll and because of their ability to attract all the stars? Like, because that's part of the Yankees.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing that's going to be a very biased answer. I'm going to give you a very biased answer. I feel like from my perspective, it's going to be so hard to see that because I think we're there now. I think we've been there, right, for the last few years. I think a lot of the if you don't live in LA and you're not a Dodger fan, all the hate comes to the Dodgers or the Yankees, right?
Well, if you guys win the next 2 or 3 championships, then it's going to be like the Yankees were in the 2000s, right? Where it's just everyone's just so sick of them. Of course, they win all the championships. They have the highest payroll and blah 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 blah.
I will say this now. Finally, I understand Yankees fans.
Yeah,
because I was like, I hate the Yankees for that reason. Because I grew up in the '90s. I was a teenager in the '90s, and that's when they were racking up all these championships. And I used to hate because Steinbrenner used to just spam, go buy me a championship, you know. And now we're in the same boat.
Yeah.
But now it's like it's hard for me to see that, you know, because I have all that history behind me, right? I have the dark years, I have all that history, so I feel like we deserve it, even though I know that I don't agree with the whole Tawny thing, deferring his pay. I think that's very kind of carny-ish.
Yeah.
I don't agree. There's a lot of I don't want him to be the MVP. I think Lindor should. We talked about it. I think Lindor should win the. You know, just as a baseball fan, I don't think no DH should be the MVP. I don't think no starting pitcher today should be the MVP because you have to play offense and defense. That's how a very traditional way of me thinking.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, I just don't see myself ever seeing that. Honestly, like I can't see it. You know,
I mean, I lived through it with the 49ers when I was a little kid. You know, they won 5 championships in like 13 years. The Warriors, when they got Kevin Durant and he joined the team, it was already good. Like there was a lot of hate. They were the villains. The Giants, because of the way that they won, which is they were like the plucky team in 2010, and then in 2014 they rode the back of their pitcher to win the championship. So I never felt like the Giants were like this killer team that's going to win every year because, you know, the bookend championships, they weren't even favored to get very far. So, but yeah, no, I mean, I completely understand how that feels. And when you're living through it, you're like, bring it on, baby. I want it all. This, you can hate my team for all that it matters, and I just want to keep see them win.
And also, I think because as fans, you're following the team all year, right? The whole season, so you see the minutia of it. You see the struggles. Even if it's a multi-billion-dollar team, you still see that they're human beings in certain days, and so that justifies them. You saying they earned this because we saw the bad days, whereas the media just covers the good days and the hoopla. So to the fan base that just hates on them, they're only seeing the good days, the big victories, you know, and all that stuff. So I think that's another thing that kind of helps me justify how much we earned this, you know. But I'm aware of it, and I see it, and it is what it is. You know, at the end of the day, another thing that I don't know if I'm saying this because it's very self-serving to me, but we've also seen the years when the Yankees try to buy a championship and they didn't have the chemistry. So there's a whole chemistry thing too. If a team doesn't have chemistry, you could have an all-star team and they ain't gonna win anything, you know. So just building that chemistry tells me that the team is a unified front. That means the city's unified with them, and we all deserve this. So, anyways, and I will say one last thing: I think this year we got a pass, even from the traditional fan base, not so much the hardcores for sure, but the traditional fan base or the casual fan base, I should say, because I think one of the biggest things that was in the news as far as the Dodgers and baseball was how many freaking injuries they had.
Mm-hmm.
So in a weird way, we ended up with that. We ended up being underdogs for a lot of the playoffs, which was weird because we're not. We're like the big all-star team that was created to win a championship. But because we had no rotation, because they all went down, it kind of made us underdogs. So I think we get a little bit of a pass this year. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe there's certain parts of the country that still hate us. But going forward, yeah, that's going to be a problem.
All right. A couple of other questions from Jay Boba here. One of them is absolutely unanswerable, but we'll go with this one first. AW this year is far better creatively compared to last year, but do you guys think the damage has been done?
No.
I don't know if they're that much better creatively. They had some rough stretches this year when they were hot shotting everything.
Yeah. But also, I really like the Mox angle. I haven't seen today's episode, but I'll see it later on. But I like the Mox angle a lot. I think there's so much potential. I think they could do their own version of the bloodline angle where you could stretch this out for years if you play your cards right. You just gotta book it consistently and not try not to make too many mistakes. Has the damage been done? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, because with this TV contract, they're gonna have all the time in the world to turn it around. So there is no such thing, and they're not gonna die. Are they gonna be able to go to where they were in 2019, 2020, 2021? That's a whole different question, and I think that's more. See, everything. It's like an ecosystem, right? So it's not just them. It's also when is the WWE gonna cool down? Because the WWE took a lot of their viewers, and so when the WWE cools down, if AEW is doing something interesting, they could get some of those viewers back. So it's
WWE's got John Cena's retirement tour all of next year. I don't know if they're going to be cooling down.
And they got Dwayne coming back for the first. No, he might or we don't even know. He might or he might not.
He's still pissing in bottles on set though. I don't know if you saw that.
he admitted to it. He does it.
This dude is got the weirdest PR going right now.
Yeah, he's got that gimmick where I don't know if he's accepted that he's an a-hole at times and he's just gonna run with it, or I don't know. But
it's kind of started. Okay, so it started when he and Vin Diesel started feuding. Like, who was the good guy? Who was the bad guy? It was the bad guy Vin, or was the bad guy Dwayne? And then when he tried to do that takeover with Black Adam and kind of push his weight around for that DC universe, and they were like, nope, it's not happening, dude. And he kind of looked like a jerk. Those two times he's pretty media savvy. Those were bad.
And then the Cody thing was bad.
The Cody thing is fake though. Well,
no. Well, he tried to, the real story of the Cody thing.
Well, I think it was the right thing to do though, which is they realized that it was a mistake. Yeah, he was changing the story, and then they realized that that's not what the fans wanted, and then he was like, okay, like I gotta back off here. Like that was not the right thing.
But the initial thing.
But the media doesn't know that part. Only we know that part.
Yes, yeah, and so that's another layer of his assholedom. But that Black Adam thing was a big owl. That was a big owl because even the Fast and the Furious drama. There's some people that blame Vin Diesel for it, so that wasn't a complete out.
They're both kind of being celebrity rich guy jerks,
right. And so, but that Black Adam, I mean, it messed a lot of things up in DC. Actually, it had like a chain reaction, like a snowball effect, and to me, he lost a lot of credibility there. So that one humbled him a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's now he's signed with Disney. So now he's trying to wield his power there, and people are worried that he's going to end up in the MCU trying to run that eventually. So we'll see what happens. But
I'm reading an awesome book about the MCU right now.
I read it already. If it's the one you're saying, the MCU,
yeah, it's great.
There's
I love that. So much knowledge in that book.
Let me see if I could. It's not in my library there. I can't read it. But what do you tell me? It's the same book. I know it is.
Yeah, Joanna Robinson is one of the authors, and
she's great, by the way. I like her podcast appearances.
She, I learned so much so that I'm just gonna, it's gonna take me forever, but I'm going through the whole MCU again because there's films that I didn't see, going back, and so I want to watch them all in order and stuff. And I'm having a good time with it. Like, I'm not the biggest Marvel fan. I don't read comic books, but just knowing the backstory of stuff makes me more interested in it.
Well, I mean, I'm not gonna go on a rant on this, but the MCU and their strategy completely changed cinema. It completely changed it forever, because now if you go to the movie theater, your choices are all IPs. Literally, they're all like there is no original. The very few, maybe one screen will get one, but there is no original ideas anymore, and that started because of the MCU and connecting all these everybody wants to connect the universes now. It's all because of the MCU. They started all that stuff.
Star Wars missed the boat, man.
Yeah, they messed their whole stuff up. They're a mess right now, and I don't know if they're ever gonna come back.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer.
I think to bring it right back to wrestling and AEW specifically. Yeah, like you said, we don't have an answer on how they could increase their ratings or weekly attendance. That's such a broad question. That
if we had the answer, we would get hired to help with creative if we did.
Right. But I will say this: Star Wars and AEW have a perception problem. And that's what they both have to work on. That's the commonality here to bring all these two topics together. Mm-hmm. And if they can't fix the perception problem, they're gonna continue. I don't have an answer because I would be making $1 million, maybe more than $1 million. Now that TK got that 170 mil,
Yeah.
If I had an answer, I would charge. I would be like, give me half of that because I deserve
it. You know what Mock said? Did you see his quotes about that?
I mean, I know he's gung-ho on resetting this thing. I know that.
Well, the quote that stood out to me, I mean, there was a few of them that stood out, but the one quote he said was, people are celebrating like we actually won something. And what we really have to do is work harder. Like it's a Vince McMahon mentality.
Oh, he's doing the Kobe gimmick.
It's the tech mentality. It's like, you don't celebrate, it's opportunity. You just gave yourself more opportunity. Like that's kind of what he's saying right now. And it's very interesting to hear someone talk about it, because what Moxley is basically saying, like his character is basically saying this company was built off of the backs of someone who's a very rich guy and could invest, but wrestlers who kind of had to work their way through wrestling. The wrestlers who started up AEW were not wrestlers from WWE who got rich and then were not used anymore. They were all independent stars, kind of, who had come through that scene. And the idea that now the people who are the benefactors of that are the newer wrestlers who didn't have to work as hard and now can actually make a living. Awesome that AEW can afford these guys to make a living, and these women, and that could be their careers. Like that is an awesome thing about it.
Right.
But at the same time, he's saying because they didn't have to work as hard, they act like they've made it when they haven't really made it yet. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. A lot of the in different ways, a lot of the CM Punk philosophy when he was there, right? These kind of entitled guys that they don't want to, study tapes. They don't want to go in the ring and practice.
They just want to go on vacation.
Yeah, Hangman Page, Jack Perry, those kind of guys. And he's right. I mean, it all depends on the lived experience, right? Every generation is going to be different. I mean, right now we live in an era where, I'll give you an example. I'll disclose one of my things. Like my new job, which I share with you, I work for a nonprofit, and I went in there and I'm working, right? And nonprofits tend to, they have a lot of people that are all about social justice and self-care, and the person that works with me, they were like, slow down, dude, like like, and I'm like, we gotta get all this done because I come from that era, right? I come from that era of like, there's expectations, there's deadlines, we have to hustle. And then these newer teams, these newer groups of people that are working together for a common goal, they're a lot more relaxed, right? It's like we'll get there when we get there because it's all about self-care. Because if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't help them. So let's just chill.
There's high burnout, and you don't want to burn out so fast, and yeah,
right.
it's an interesting mentality for sure.
So me and Mox come from that era. Like we haven't won shit. We gotta keep on going. And then this new generation is like, we're gonna get there, but let's just slow down a little bit, you know. So I'm kind of dealing with the same thing too. It's weird. It's a weird thing. Like they're telling me, go take. Do you need to take a couple days off? I'm like, nobody's ever offered me that. Like, what the hell's going on here? You know?
Yeah, there's been a pivot for sure in the industry, and you see some companies like, gosh, what company just recently? I think I want to say was it Amazon? But there's a big tech company that's like, no more work from home. Everyone's got to be in the office. And
it was Amazon. Yeah.
And imagine the lifestyle adjustment, right?
Right.
Like you literally adjusted your lifestyle to make sure you could work from home. You changed up schedules. You created offices. You built in these new processes for you and your team and your body clock and all that stuff. And now they're like, nope, you're back. We're going back to the old way. The old way, it's got to be a shock. Like, I haven't been to the office more than twice a week since the pandemic. Like I'm still working from home pretty much all the time. And I'll be back in the office next week, but it's an adjustment, man. Like you feel like, you lose out by going to the office, but you are focusing on your job, that you can only focus on your job and you can't do anything else. Whereas if you're home, you work and then you fit in your eating and you're working out, and so it's just a different lifestyle for sure.
Yeah, working from home is a very privileged lifestyle, but that's the norm now. And imagine all the kids that graduated high school in 2019 and they're just now in the workforce, with all these with this cultural shift. They're like, what do you mean work in the office? It's like they have no concept of that. So it is interesting. Times are changing. It also affects AEW, these younger guys, and I could see how Mox gets frustrated, and some of the older guys, like CM Punk, blew a gasket over all that shit.
Okay, so the part about that celebrating quote, do you think that had anything to do with Tony Khan?
Yeah.
I think not that I think that quote was about Tony Khan, but because, and I have experiences with Tony Khan, right? Tony Khan is on the air with Dave and I celebrating his success, and it's great. You should celebrate your success. And yet everything we ever read about Vince McMahon was he would go out on the stage at WrestleMania. Chris Jericho has this great story in his book saying, hey, Vince, why don't you soak it in? And Vince kind of looks out, takes a deep breath, and he's like, all right, on to the next one. Like, that was his mentality. Now, that is a little bit of a facade, because we know there's stuff going on in his company that he doesn't have his eye on the ball constantly either. But, I am of the opinion that Tony Khan should celebrate the successes. They challenged WWE. They had WWE on their heels for that small period of time, but it felt like there was a shift. Unfortunately, they didn't have the infrastructure. All these different things happened, and it wasn't stable. And then WWE just took off because they took one of their best guys. I do wonder, though, if when you get there to that moment where you're eye to eye with WWE, you kind of have to feel like you made it, right? In that it only took them 2.5 years or whatever, 3 years to be right there. I'm sure he felt like, man, we made it, and then the bottom fell out, and now you got to figure out how to pick it up again.
Yes, but I have a couple counters to that. One is, so how does that change Eric Bischoff's success? Because should we celebrate his 2 years on top and see it as this monumental thing?
I celebrate it. I think it's an awesome moment. It was the singular thing that made wrestling cool again. That wasn't WWF. That was WCW shoving it up WWF's ass and Vince McMahon having to answer. That's what made that era great.
Right. And on top of that, because we as human beings need to stay positive to get us through, does Eric Bischoff focus way too much on those 2 years and doesn't really bring attention to like what happened afterwards, right? Which was a downfall. Which sometimes I feel like TK is the same way, even though they're completely different people. You want to celebrate the victories, and sometimes in celebrating the victories, you minimize the defeats and also what needs to be done to get out of those defeats, right? So
you made a good point about experiences. And if you think about Vince McMahon, he's got the experiences of kind of restarting his brand a few different times, and they weren't all the same. Sometimes he tried to go back to the same well, like trying to find 27 versions of Hulk Hogan.
right, the
But
big guys.
Eric Bischoff, he rose and didn't know a different way to rise. He just thought, it's Hogan,
Right.
and that's my way. And if that doesn't work, I don't have a plan B. And this is what we've been talking about with Tony Khan, is you have to have multiple options to maneuver, and you have to read things. And I think they're trying some stuff now, like Moxley's angle.
I see it too.
His angle right now, it's all him. And I do wonder if this angle is kind of a response to him being like, what are we doing, guys? Like, we've signed all these big contracts for people. We're bringing all these people in. We're minimizing them right away. Like, we need to do something different. And from what I understand, this whole angle is Moxley. Like, Tony's not even really involved in this Death Riders thing. So, this is a different option. It's like Tony's so hands-on. He wants to run everything. He wants to win or lose for himself. But now he's like, oh, maybe I am a little bit of I'm a control freak. So let me hand this off to Moxley. And
the only thing is that I wish Moxley was retired, because then you have that disease, right? Like that whole thing, like you get corrupted by the power. And I don't want to see Moxley on top for the next 3-4 years, because it's not going to work. He's got to be very unselfish.
He's got to have an idea of where the end of it is.
Yeah. It's like Brian Alvarez was saying. Well, who's going to be their savior? Who's going to be their Cody Rhodes at the end, dethroning the big guy? There's a couple options. I still say it should be Will Ospreay. Like
that's what Dave says.
And we're looking at maybe a year down the line, maybe even a year and a half, and I want Will Ospreay to kind of go through his trials and tribulations, right? He's not always going to, the usual hero's journey. You want the hero's journey, humanize them, kind of like what Cody went through. That would be perfect, because if they do it right, I mean, I'm not saying that's their answer to get out of where they're at right now, but it's gonna make for better TV. And we know they're gonna be on TV for at least the next 3 years.
Yep.
So I agree with you. I'm glad that Tony Khan is thinking outside the box now. I'm glad that he's got certain people in his ear that are saying, bro, it's not all about 5-star matches. It's not about the Observer. Like, let's do some storylines here, because at the end of the day, I love storylines. Like, I love that soap opera aspect of wrestling. I can't do the whole just match. I just can't do it. I know Dave loves that, but I can't do that.
But I mean, Dave loves storylines as well. He just, when you are so in the weeds on something like Dave is, the thing that can make him excited about wrestling is a great match. And if the other stuff is bad, at least you have the great match to look forward to. And that's I think that's probably how he thinks about it in that way, and why match quality is so important to him is because he's just been watching wrestling for the last 50 some odd years of his life, right? So that is kind of his process, is like, okay, it's not always going to be great, but there's going to be a match that I can get really excited about, and it'll make me feel good about what we're doing here.
Yeah, I mean, I like to see that he's a fan. Like I told you before, like I love, because right now, I mean, I'm not as consistent as the listener as I used to be, but I still listen. I already know that he's settled his flag on Kyle Fletcher, right? That's gonna be his guy now. He loves this guy, and Dave is very much like the guy from PWI magazine. What was his name? Bill Abner. Like, these guys could make or break guys. Like Bill Abner made Lex Luger. Like, let's be real about it.
All those photographs, yeah.
Yeah, he got over Mil Mascaras, to this country. Like, and I feel like Dave has that power too. And it's like he's already like when I hear him talk about Kyle Fletcher, like, the guy's, he's excited, right? And because he's young, I think he's 25 years old. He's a great worker, which checks the criteria for Dave, and he's got some good little promo ability. So, and this is the reality of how things are, because Dave's a human being like I am, like you are. He is going to be a little more lenient with Kyle Fletcher going forward, and I want people to watch for that. And that's fine, because he's a fan, and I want him to be a fan. I don't want him to be a robot. So keep Kyle Fletcher's his guy now. And what I like about that is when they fuck up Kyle's booking, Dave's gonna get very emotional about it. Mark my words. Or when they do, when they do something good, he's gonna put it over big time. What are you gonna say?
So I had this conversation with John on the Fight Game podcast, which is, do you think, now this is not to do with wrestling skill, this is to do with sort of star power. Do you think Kyle Fletcher has the chance of being a bigger star than Will Ospreay in AEW?
You want me to answer first, or you're going to tell me what he said?
John said it would probably be hard for him to be, because Will's got such a head start. My perspective was, because Kyle has the sort of the look already, and he's got a few inches on Will. Not that height
He's a tall guy too, yeah.
But I think he's going to fill out even more, and he's going to kind of he's going to have that like Randy Orton look, probably very soon.
Right.
And hopefully he's not going to be as giant as Randy, but I think there's a good chance that when it's all said and done, Will Ospreay be the greatest worker in history. But when it comes to being in the main event and being meaningful, I think Kyle's got a shot to beat him in that.
I think Kyle's, I agree with you 100%, and I think Kyle's going to be AEW Sting. Like, he's going to be the guy that's going to be loyal, because keep in mind that's the AEW guy, right? Kyle Fletcher, he came in from the Indies and from Europe and all that, not really well known, but people are going to see him as, this is our guy. He got over in AEW, whereas Will Ospreay was already a made guy when he got there.
Yes.
And I'm predicting this, man. Will Ospreay will have, when it's all said and done, Will Ospreay will have about 2 or 3 WrestleMania main events under his belt. Mark my words on that. And so, but I think Kyle Fletcher is going to be the guy that's going to stay, because that's his company, and we're seeing him kind of evolve right in front of our eyes, and he's going to be the pillar, like they like to say, the pillar of a company. So yeah, so I agree with you. I think he's going to be the guy for AEW.
All right, last question. Samantha Irvin's exit. I will keep mine short. Great for her. If she didn't want to be there and she's got the freedom and she's got the ability to do something else, go do what you want to do, man. You don't got to stick in wrestling just because it's wrestling.
Hey, I'm all about that, man. I'm all about, if you're not happy at your job, you got to leave. And she even gave us the privilege to tell us why. She didn't have to do that. She's like, I wanted to do more things. They wanted to keep me as a ring announcer. That I don't want to do that, and so she left. It's just sad that she takes a lot of shit from a lot of like the WWE fan base. I don't know, especially because I don't know. It's the whole entitled thing of the internet that bothers me. Like, why? She's already given us more information than we deserve, right? Because she didn't have to go into details, but she was like, look, this is why I left. And so, yeah, I'm happy for her.
It's definitely the entitlement. It's like, we were talking about Star Wars or MCU prior. Like, if one of the actors in the MCU was like, I don't want to be playing Thor until I'm 50 years old, like, it's impossible. There is a specific side of that fan base who would all of a sudden be negative towards that actor who they are cheering their asses for on television. It's so weird that the fandom could be like that. Or if to another something a little bit more similar to us, if Jeff Kent has some great years on the Giants,
Jeff Kent, oh my god,
and then he goes and plays for the Dodgers. I don't hate Jeff Kent. I don't.
Well, that did happen. What was your feelings on that?
Person. I couldn't root for him anymore, so I had to jeer him. It wasn't of I still like Jeff. It was like, no, for these years that he's on the Dodgers, I can't root for him. He's not my guy. He after he retires, he'll be good again.
So, before we get out of here, I one of the things that makes me laugh about the whole Samantha Irvin thing. A couple of weeks ago, I was listening to you and Dave on the Friday show, and Dave was being Dave, right? I'm always of the mind that Dave is very pro AEW, and you were like, but Jade Cargill got the same thing from the AEW fans,
yeah.
and then this is what made me laugh. So Dave, he kind of says, well, that they're wrong, but then he goes on and criticizes her for the same reason. That, you know what I'm saying? He's like, yeah, but she should have been more over, but she's not over. And I'm like, you just kind of justified this whole tribalism by you picking a side, But anyways, that was just funny to me. But yeah, I mean, they're especially the women, they get it from both sides.
Part of the problem with when Dave has to answer questions like that is in his mind, he knows the reasons for things happening, not only from the company side, but also from the talent side. So like, I have no idea if Jade forced her way out or if Jade told Tony that she wanted to be there, but she really wanted to be in WWE. Like, I don't know any of that, but sometimes, and I'm not saying specifically for this story, but sometimes I can see Dave talking, and as he's talking, his brain is working of how to cushion something without giving away a source or without giving away. And sometimes the source is the actual wrestler, right? And he doesn't want to give that away. So he's talking, and you can tell this sometimes. Now he uses this a lot. I think he is it whatever, he uses something that where he just stops talking about something and he'll go like whatever or something like that.
Yeah, I've been listening to Dave for over 25 years. I know.
So there's two or three reasons why he does that. One, he feels like he's going somewhere that may not be great with what he's going to say, and so he stops himself. Or two, he's saying too much, right? He's had this situation where, and then the famous one is, I think it was, I forget which women wrestlers it was. It was the Iconics, and he was basically saying something to the effect of, he noticed that maybe they weren't as thin as they were at one point, and he kind of wondered what was going on. The meaning behind what he was really saying is kind of what we talked about earlier, which is Vince is going to have an issue with that, and it could be problematic if they had gained weight. But he couldn't say Vince, and so he says the Iconics, and it gets taken out of context, and he's insensitive. And I went to him and I said, I understood what you were saying. You were basically saying it from Vince's perspective without giving away that it was Vince. And he's like, yeah, but I shouldn't have said it this, so he knew. But that's a lot of times when he says something, his mind is kind of going in a few different directions because he doesn't want to say too much. But then it's like, you have a podcast, dude. So you kind of sometimes,
yeah.
But, and so, when he and I do that show, there are some times when I or the audience, because we take a lot of questions, I will ask him something directly, and you may not get like a very clear answer, but the way that he says it, you kind of know the thing that he doesn't want to give away. And I think some listeners are very perceptive and they'll understand that. But it's kind of my job. Like, I'm not going to throw him under the bus. I'm not going to give him a question that I don't think he can handle or that is unfair. But sometimes I'm going to ask him certain things where he may not want to answer it, and his not answering it kind of gives you the answer if you follow closely enough.
No, I get it. Yeah, and I get where you're at with it as well. I think sometimes, and I've told you this before, like even with the TK defense, I understand that Dave has lived a lifetime pretty much of seeing the WWE as these bullies, right? They're bullies. They have been bullies. We know that. That's a fact. And so whenever he sees an underdog, which, he classifies TK as an underdog, then he wants to kind of advocate for him. And I get all that. And I agree with some of that, but I think sometimes he gets lost in that. and then he over protects TK, and it gets him in trouble all the time. And a consequence of that is that in his perception, he sees the WWE fans as meaner than the AEW fans because he's getting that all the time.
That is the thing that I'm not sure he fully understands. Is
Right.
his Twitter feed is specifically designed to continue to feed him negative stuff about AEW because they want him to keep engaging, and he's kind of he's like mopped up by the algorithm, and so I think to an extent he knows that, but as he's doing it, he probably doesn't realize it all the time.
Because both fan bases could be very harsh. I mean, AEW fan base is the same thing. I mean, I've seen them be very brutal, especially with women.
And I've told him, I said, my feed, the only time I see one of these WWE grifters is because an AEW fan is retweeting them into my feed. That's the only time I see them, because my feed is specifically designed to block a lot of that stuff. But the AEW fans themselves are the ones who are retweeting them into mine. So,
right.
But here's one thing I want to end with, and I'm kind of interested in your answer here. So, like the idea that you're covering, let's just say right now, Dave is covering Tony Khan and Paul Levesque. Like those are the two important people in his wrestling coverage. One of those guys grew up reading him and communicates with him from time to time, and especially very early on in the kind of the building of the community was communicating with him. He probably believes that Tony's a smart, good person. The other guy, you don't communicate with him very much, and a lot of your reporting from the time when this wrestler was on top was negative politically because you heard from people who this guy was screwing over constantly.
Right.
So you have this perception of these two people, and you're trying to cover them fairly. Now, you're not being dismissive towards Paul Levesque because success is absolutely right there. You got to be blind to not see it. But on the other end, you kind of feel for the other person who is not as business savvy as the machine and maybe falling for, kind of making mistakes in this way from the perception thing that we talk about. I think it's very natural to report in your reporting some of the unfairness, but also in how you're kind of how you're writing both of these companies. AEW is absolutely the plucky underdog, and WWE is like the giant machine. And I think as long as you communicate the facts, the story or the narrative of your writing is always going to be plucky underdog versus machine. The machine should always win. Like that, the machine is designed to always win. And when the plucky underdog does something good, it's a little bit more newsworthy than when the machine does something good. And I think that's kind of the dichotomy that we were talking about, which is reporting from 1989, which is why I love that we did this thing, is very similar to the reporting from 2024. And I look at it from that perspective of when I'm reading both current and 1989.
Yeah, but I think what's hard, at least for me, and I know for other people as well, and is that AEW, they are the underdog. They are however, the owner is not an underdog.
No.
And that's hard. I'm gonna be honest with you. It is hard because the owner is a very privileged person.
Yeah.
Right. And honestly, they never really have anything at stake here. They're gonna live their life. They're millionaires for life, essentially. So that's very hard.
This is play money. His dad literally said, "This is money for you to play with."
Right. And again, so I already have that perspective, right? So that's already messing with me. And when Dave minimizes that, which he does all the time, now I have a negative thing with Dave too, because like, why aren't you reporting this? Why aren't you reporting that? Because he has a whole thing with money mark. He's not a money mark. He is a money mark. Like Dave said it himself. I remember he said, he's like, had they not gotten this contract, the company wasn't gonna close. So what does that make them? Like if you're losing money and you're keeping it afloat because you just got money, That's a money mark, you know. And but I get Dave's point of view. Like I've never ever, and I've been talking to you for years about this.
Mm-hmm.
Like I get it's human nature to like you said it perfectly. One company's talking to him, one company isn't. One company, the guy's a fan of Dave, you know, and that's gonna have an effect.
No,
Believe me,
I'm
that's gonna.
specifically talking about Paul. Dave talks to so many other people in WWE, but I would be surprised if he told me, yeah, I had a conversation with Paul Levesque the other day. I'm sure there's ways that he can pass that information or communicate, but it's not the same relationship. And Dave's business is actually a relationship business. That's how he succeeds, is to have relationships with these people. But go ahead.
I did feel, I don't feel this anymore because again, we talked earlier, John Moxley's in his ear now, other people are in TK's ear, but I did feel in the early years there was definitely that mentorship going on with Dave and Tony Khan. Like there was that mentor relationship, whether it was transmitted personally through phone calls or just through the newsletter. But he was his mentor, and that's good because it got him to a certain level. But nowadays it's different, which I'm all for because again, we need change in that company. But I agree with you 100%. It's gonna have an effect on you.
Yeah.
You know, when somebody's close to you and you're communicating with them, whereas the other one you have to use different levels to communicate messages. You know, middle persons, and that's media. That's not Dave. That's media. You know, that's why I never agreed with again, I'm all about the movie business. Like all these screenings that all these critics get, right? People in the media get. Or now a big thing is these gift baskets that they send to reporters. It's a bribe, is what it is.
Yeah,
You
they're
know,
working them, man.
you get your little gift basket from this particular movie. Now you're gonna put over my movie on social media. Everybody wins, and that's becoming the norm in media, and it bothers me because it's like, where is the real news here? Like, you know what I'm saying? It's gone because everybody's out just to get theirs now.
Mm-hmm.
You know. Not that Dave's like that, because I know he's not, but that relationship with Tony Khan, it's inherently going to become that. You know, there's no malicious intent, there's no bias. It's going to be that. When you know somebody at a quasi personal level, you're rooting for them regardless. And the other company has Paul, who's like 3, 4, 5 people separate from you. That's going to be a big difference there. You know, and we haven't even talked about the history as well, because Dave came up with guys, the Paul Bosch guys, who really felt like Vince really, undercut them, and all of Dave's mentors were those guys.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a whole history of that as well. But I just get concerned for Dave's legacy sometimes. You know, to be honest with you, because I know he deserves it. He deserves.
Yeah, I mean, the Twitter thing is probably been a detriment to that, but it is just something that he finds mindless and helps him get through the hard parts of his day. And I don't know how to, to give him any more information than that. It's just his choice to be on Twitter, and it's probably not the best for what you're talking about.
Because if I ever had a chance to like sit down with Dave, like I said with Dr. Lucha that one time in Vegas, and just pick Dave's brain, like I would love to have that conversation with us. It's like, because we live in a very unfair world, right?
Yeah.
And we have carnies like Bischoff, carnies like Bruce Pritchard, who have conjured up their own fan base, and they're young people, and as you know, young people run this world. And my concern for Dave is that that's going to affect his legacy, right? And at the end of the
You
day,
seen the new one? Dutch Mantel?
Yeah, Danny told me about it. I didn't pay no attention to it because I'm not on Twitter, but I guess, yeah, he brought up the whole thing with TK and how TK donated, and it became a thing. And so they latch on to that stuff, right? For better or worse. Again, it's not about being fair or unfair or truth or not truth, especially on social media. And so as Dave's real fan base, like us, or like older people, as they start dying off or moving on, like me, I've moved on for different reasons, particularly because I don't have time anymore. These younger people, they're the ones that are they're the custodians of history, And so my concern is that Dave's gonna be looked at as this old timer out of touch, who doesn't know what's going on, who's an AEW fanboy, and it's all gonna be powered by the Eric Bischoffs and the Bruce Pritchards who do have an influence and who do have an audience. That's the conversation that I would like to have with Dave. Like, I would like to see, how does he feel about that? Because he's a guy that deserves to have a legacy based on facts, you know, and I fear that he's not gonna have that.
Yeah, from my perspective, the Dutch thing is his podcast partner knows that, you know, being negative towards Dave is going to get them tons of views. Now, Dutch is really sick from what I understand, and Dave pointed out the GoFundMe in the newsletter. He retweeted the GoFundMe on Twitter, and he wrote the thing that he did, which is that it's kind of interesting that Dutch was one of the bad faith people on AEW, and Tony Khan was the highest donator of in wrestling. And so he found that was like an interesting thing, and that podcaster, I guess Dutch's podcast partner, he's just trying to capitalize on this nonsensical drama that isn't even there, and it's as you would expect. It is pretty insincere. It is, unfortunately,
for sure.
insincere. And I don't root for anyone to be ill, but you know, Dutch. I mean, we've heard Dutch man tell stories. He doesn't sound like the greatest person, but you also don't want to see him sick or anything. So
yeah, for sure.
All right, man. I think this is the longest one we've ever done, and I feel like
there was a 3-hour one a couple months ago.
I feel like, you know, I think of podcasting in this way a lot of times, which is, I would never, like, you and I have had podcasts in a car ride before, where if we recorded that conversation, it'd be a good podcast.
Right.
But I like saving these conversations for stuff like this, because it is really like catching up with a friend. And you look forward to it. Like, whenever we schedule one of these, I'm always like looking forward to it. I'm like, okay, I have my notes. Here are the things I want to say.
Yeah.
This might make him laugh. This will be intriguing. And then as we talk, we go on a tangent, and I'm like, this is a perfect time to ask this and see what he thinks about this. So it's a blast. You know, maybe we probably shouldn't be doing these long ones just for our own sleep patterns or whatever, but it's just because you just get going and it's fun. So
yeah, one thing about me, and I apologize to you because I'm a very long-winded person. Not just in podcasts, but in real life. Like, when I go to meetings or whatever, I'm just a very passionate guy. Like, when I'm into something, I could express myself. And so that's why I always go long. You know, that's my whole thing with podcasts. I always unrehearsed and just let's do it.
I mean, that's why the podcast medium is successful, is because people like to talk, and if it's entertaining, then it works.
Yeah. And I follow a lot of podcasters, you know, especially like with personal development stuff. This is the norm. Like, you have these guys that are going, some podcasts that go for like 4 hours, dude. And like I listened to it was Andrew Huberman, like his podcasts go on forever, you know? And so, but they're very informational, and I like them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Joe Rogan does he has a 3-hour mark all the time. Minimum is 3 hours most of the time.
Yeah.
So, but anyways.
So you and I will get back and we'll talk Survivor Series. I think there's another Saturday night's main event in November, and then the Clash, one of the most famous clashes of all time. That's right. the New York Knockout. So, all right, next time, that's what we will talk about for the November 1989. And we did a good job catching up, because we had gotten behind, and we kind of caught up in in September, October. So, you know, we'll be back on our normal, probably 3 weeks to a month cadence, and then we'll have November and December, and then we're moving on. So it'll be fun to capture the last couple months here. All right. For Draven, I'm Double G. Thanks for hanging in there. We'll see you when we see you. Peace out.
Bye.